Chapter 2047, Bedazzling. Chapter 2047, Bedazzling. Bloody hell! Su Zimo widened his intoxicated eyes and looked at the few Shangguan clansmen who were rushing over. He deliberately shouted, "Why? Is the Shangguan family so overbearing? Has the stargazing platform become part of the Shangguan family?" The others naturally watched the show. However, Heaven Immortal Cold Light and the other two of Astral Sect frowned slightly. Heaven Immortal Cold Light coughed gently. Although the Shangguan clan was one of the major clans of Solar Luna County, they could not chase people away from the stargazing platform casually under his watch. The few Shangguan clansmen had ugly expressions and could neither advance nor retreat. "That's enough." Right then, a cold voice sounded. Shangguan Qian was walking over and waved casually. "You guys can disperse. Prepare for the trial." When the Shangguan clansmen heard that, they glared at Su Zimo before leaving. Shangguan Qian glanced at Su Zimo indifferently and stood not far away from him. There were already more than 100 people on the stargazing platform. Heaven Immortal Cold Light channeled his spirit consciousness and conjured a dermic art. A spirit light surged from his fingertip and entered the stargazing platform. The trial had begun. The many cultivators on the stargazing platform channeled their blood chi hurriedly and released their spirit consciousnesses. They looked up at the starry skies, wanting to establish a connection with the stars in the firmament and activate the starlight. Su Zimo was the only one trying his best to calm his blood chi and focus like an old monk in meditation, afraid that he would cause too much of a stir. Since he wanted to enter Astral Sect and lay dormant, he could not be too high profile. If the stargazing platform was truly related to his bloodline, the moment he activated his Green Lotus bloodline, it would definitely cause a violent reaction from the stargazing platform. If he were to condense a starlight beam that was 70 or 80 feet tall at that time, he would become everyone's focus. Therefore, even when the Shangguan clansmen were channeling their blood chi with all their might, Su Zimo was still nonchalant and seemed like he could fall asleep at any moment with hazy eyes. On the other side, Shangguan Qian did not disappoint either. The range of the starlight beam she condensed was even larger than Zhuo Zhuxuan's. By the fifth breath, it had already broken through a height of 40 feet. If nothing went wrong, she would be able to reach 50 feet or even higher. Not bad, not bad. Heaven Immortal Cold Light smiled and nodded slightly. "We have two people with 50 feet starlight beams this time round. They're quite the rare geniuses. Unfortunately, they won't belong to Astral Sect at the end of the day." The old man at the side sighed gently. The three of them knew that the reason why geniuses of the 5 major family clans of Solar Luna County joined Astral Sect was because of the illusory legend of the past. One day, these geniuses would leave again. At the end of the day, Astral Sect was only a black-grade sect. If these geniuses wanted greater accomplishments, they would definitely have to attempt to join an Earth-grade sect. In the blink of an eye, it was the 8th breath. The starlight beam around Shangguan Qian had already broken through to a height of 50 feet. Although Shangguan Qian could not break through to 60 feet in the remaining 2 breaths, she could still climb a little more. Almost everyone's eyes were fixed on Shangguan Qian. Nobody noticed that Su Zimo, who was not far away from her, was frowning in deep thought. Su Zimo controlled himself well and no starlight appeared in his body. However, seeing that there were only 2 breaths left and the trial was about to end, he was carefully trying to circulate a trace of his bloodline. Right then, a warning flashed in Su Zimo's mind. From the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a gigantic beam of light charging towards him. Shangguan Qian. Although she did not say anything earlier on, she was still extremely disgusted when she saw an ugly burly man reeking of alcohol enter the midst of the Shangguan clansmen. Seeing that the trial was about to end, Shangguan Qian was prepared to teach this drunkard a lesson. Her method was simple as well. In fact, she did not even have to do it personally. In Shangguan Qian's eyes, this drunkard was covered in dust and reeked of alcohol. If she were to hit him, she would be dirtying herself. The starlight beam around Shangguan Qian had a larger radius and could accommodate 2 people. As long as she came to the drunkard's side, the 50 feet tall starlight beam that she condensed through the stargazing platform would be enough to send him flying with ease. Letting this drunkard fall from the stargazing platform could be considered as a lesson for him. Of course, Su Zimo did not know what Shangguan Qian was thinking. However, He naturally did not want to be sent flying when he saw someone charging over. After all, he had yet to pass the trial. Instinctively, Su Zimo stabilized himself and his legs seemed to have taken root, locking onto the stargazing platform. Shangguan Qian's starlight beam collided with Su Zimo's green lotus true body, but he did not budge. Su Zimo's figure gradually fused into the starlight beam. Initially, Su Zimo tried his best to control his green lotus bloodline so that it would not leak out at all. But now, the starlight beam enveloped the green lotus true body and starlight filled his body. The starlight inevitably came into contact with the green lotus bloodline as well. Although the starlight beam was condensed by Shangguan Qian, it was also formed because the stargazing platform was connected to the firmaments. Now that the starlight sensed the green lotus bloodline, it was equivalent to the stargazing platform sensing it as well. In that instant, the entire world shook and the weather changed. Immediately after, a bedazzling starlight beam burst forth from Su Zimo's body. The radius of the starlight beam was so large that it even enveloped the entire stargazing platform. Initially, there were more than 100 Shangguan clansmen standing on the stargazing platform. Right then, the 100-odd Shangguan clansmen were swept down from the stargazing platform by the starlight beam that burst forth from Su Zimo's body. Even Shangguan Qian could not avoid it. She did not know what happened at all and merely felt herself colliding against the drunkard. Thereafter, an incomparably terrifying power seemed to burst forth from the drunkard's body and sent her flying. She wanted to open her eyes and look, but her vision was shrouded by a blinding light. It was white and she could not see anything. The starlight was way too strong. She was not the only one. Many cultivators watching from the front gate were blinded. Everyone either closed their eyes or lowered their heads to avoid it. The crowd exclaimed. Some of the cultivators who were slower to dodge were blinded by the powerful starlight that burst forth from the stargazing platform and tears streamed down their faces. Not to mention the Black Immortals and Earth Immortals present. Even the 3 Heaven Immortal experts of Astral Sect who were hosting the entrance trial were shocked. They glanced sideways and narrowed their eyes instinctively. Even they were blinded momentarily by that terrifying light. The 3 Heaven Immortal experts hurriedly channeled their spirit consciousnesses and circulated essence chi to protect their eyes. Without hesitation, Heaven Immortal Cold Light condensed a visual technique and secret skill. He tried his best to open his eyes and look towards the stargazing platform. Pest! That single glance caused his expression to change and he nearly fell from midair. Chapter 2048. Shock of Astral Sect. Chapter 2048. Shock of Astral Sect. In Heaven Immortal Cold Light's line of sight, a gigantic starlight beam burst forth from the stargazing platform and soared into the skies. Above the firmaments, millions of stars shone and endless starlight scattered down, connecting to the starlight beam. The starlight beam could no longer be measured using a height of 10 feet. The beam of light seemed to have already connected to heaven and earth and the stars. How is this possible? What exactly happened? Heaven Immortal Cold Light shrugged his head and tried his best to blink. In fact, he even thought that everything before him was his imagination. On the stargazing platform. As the progenitor of this violent reaction, Su Zimo was shocked as well. He tried his best to control himself and was careful, thinking that he could keep a low profile and not attract attention. However, he had not expected that by some freak coincidence, the Green Lotus bloodline would trigger such a violent reaction from the stargazing platform. Actually, the reason why the stargazing platform had such a strong reaction was not only because of the Green Lotus bloodline, but also because of the 2 divine stones in Su Zimo's eyes, illumination and nether glow. After the starlight beam was released, Su Zimo knew that the commotion this time round was way too great. He was anxious as well. If the starlight beam did not disappear, it would definitely cause a huge stir. He definitely could not stay in Astral Sect any longer. Right then, a commotion happened in Su Zimo's consciousness. The Green Lotus Essence Spirit wielded the Trinity Auspicious Jade and sat on the Creation Lotus platform the entire time. At that moment, the Trinity Auspicious Jade in the hands of the Green Lotus Essence Spirit seemed to have sensed something and trembled slightly. Immediately after, the endless starlight that surrounded him surged into his consciousness through the top of his head as though it had a place to go. The Trinity auspicious jade left the palm of the green lotus essence spirit and arrived in midair above the consciousness, trembling slightly. 3 dull beads were embedded on the auspicious cloud at the front of the Trinity auspicious jade. Right in front of the green lotus essence spirit, the endless starlight surged into one of the 3 beads. The bead began to glow faintly. If one focused their attention, they could vaguely see that there seemed to be some starlight floating in the bead like thin stars. Su Zimo was dumbfounded. According to the inheritance memories of the creation green lotus, the 3 beads on the Trinity auspicious jade's head indeed had a powerful background. They were the infinite beads. The 3 beads were condensed from the essence of the sun, moon and stars in the chaos and corresponded to heaven, earth and man. They were blessed by the heavens and coexisted with the Tao. The term Trinity in the Trinity auspicious jade referred to the 3 infinite beads. Although Su Zimo knew the origin of the 3 infinite beads, he had yet to discover how to activate them, let alone how to use them. The sudden change caused a thought to flash through Su Zimo's mind. If the 3 infinite beads were condensed from the essence of the sun, moon and stars, there was a high chance that the bead that absorbed the starlight earlier on was a star bead. Su Zimo had a hunch that he might have unintentionally discovered another mysterious aspect of the Trinity auspicious jade. But now was not the time to study that treasure. He was on the stargazing platform and had caused such a huge commotion. The most important thing was how he could escape unscathed without attracting much attention. Initially, Su Zimo intended to take advantage of the chaos to leave. But now, the starlight around him was completely absorbed by one of the infinite beads on the Trinity auspicious jade and there were no more phenomenons. He could attempt to bluff his way through. On the other side, Heaven Immortal Cold Light shrugged his head and tried his best to stay awake. When he opened his eyes again, he was stunned on the spot with his mouth agape in a daze. The resplendent starlight beam from earlier on had already vanished. It was as though everything he saw earlier was just his imagination. Heaven Immortal Cold Light frowned. There was only a drunkard left on the stargazing platform, slumped on the spot. His wine jar was shattered and he was covered in wine. He had a dazed expression, as though he was scared out of his wits. The other 2 Heaven Immortals snapped out of their stupor and asked instinctively, "What's going on? What happened just now?" "I don't know." Heaven Immortal Cold Light shook his head. He did not know how to explain or describe it. Could it be related to this person? Heaven Immortal Cold Light glared at the drunk man on the stargazing platform for a long time. His spirit consciousness scanned him a few times but could not find anything unusual. Chapter 2049, Mo Ling. Chapter 2049, Mo Ling. What happened? The sect master of Astral Sect, Astral Rain, looked at Heaven Immortal Cold Light and the other 2 and asked in a deep voice. Heaven Immortal Cold Light hesitated for a moment and said, "For some reason, a gigantic starlight beam suddenly burst forth from the stargazing platform and swept all the cultivators on the platform down." As he said that, Heaven Immortal Cold Light looked at the drunk man on the stargazing platform. Right now, the drunkard was the only one left on the stargazing platform. Bloody hell! The drunkard seemed to have just snapped out of his stupor as he stomped on the stargazing platform repeatedly with widened eyes, cursing, "What's wrong with this lousy thing? There must be something wrong with this stargazing platform. You scared me." Sect Master Astral Rain and the elders behind him glanced at Su Zimo as well but did not notice anything unusual. Furthermore, no one would believe that such a huge commotion earlier on was caused by a Grade 1 Earth Immortal. Heaven Immortal Cold Light continued, "Earlier on, a phenomenon appeared and endless starlight descended from the stars in the skies, gathering and connecting to the starlight beam. However," pausing for a moment he said, "However, not long after, the starlight beam seemed to have disappeared within a few breaths." Disappeared. Sect Master Astral Rain frowned slightly. In reality, they did not see what happened at the entrance. They only came out of seclusion after sensing a tremendous energy fluctuation and a blinding light. As for the cultivators around the mountain gate, they were blinded by the bedazzling starlight and could not see the exact process. Heaven Immortal Cold Light was the only one who could see the entire process clearly. However, the entire process was too short. Even if he could see it clearly, he was at a loss and could not believe it. Could something have truly happened to the stargazing platform? Even in the records of Astral Sect, there seemed to be no precedence of such a phenomenon. Heaven Immortal Cold Light would definitely not believe that someone's bloodline and physique could trigger such a phenomenon. When Astral Sect was first established, the paragons and monster incarnates of the heavenly world only condensed 80 or 90 feet starlight beams at most. That starlight beam earlier connected heaven and earth directly. How could a phenomenon as such be created by a human? Sect Master Astral Rain pondered for a moment and said, "Cold Light, continue hosting the trial. I'll watch from here." "All right." Heaven Immortal Cold Light nodded and declared, "Cultivators with starlight in their bodies on the stargazing platform earlier on, come to my side to receive your sect badge." Initially, Lin Ming and Xie Tianhuang wanted to cause trouble for Su Zimo. However, they could only give up for the time being when they saw that the sect master of Astral Sect was here. Shangguan Qian and dozens of Shangguan clansmen headed towards Heaven Immortal Cold Light. Su Zimo leaped down from the stargazing platform and staggered towards Heaven Immortal Cold Light as well. The dozens of Shangguan clansmen received their sect badges one after another. In Astral Sect, Black Immortals could only be considered as outer sect disciples with their cultivation realms. They did not have individual cave abodes to cultivate, and could only find their own residences in the mountain ranges of Astral Sect. If one was at the Earth Immortal realm, they could open up their own cave abodes on the 7 main peaks of Astral Sect or choose an empty predecessor's cave abode as their own. Su Zimo arrived before Heaven Immortal Cold Light without any fear. He cupped his fists casually and extended his palm crudely, asking for the sect badge. His every move had to match his identity as a drunkard and could not be too different. "You." Heaven Immortal Cold Light frowned and glanced at Su Zimo, saying indifferently, "From my observation, there didn't seem to be any starlight in your body earlier on." "How so?" Su Zimo glared drunkenly and argued, "My starlight only appeared later on." In reality, because he was suppressing his bloodline, there was indeed no starlight during the 8th breath. In the next 2 breaths, a sudden change happened on the stargazing platform and no one could be sure if starlight surged out of Su Zimo's body. Just as Heaven Immortal Cold Light was hesitating, Shangguan Qian at the side suddenly spoke, "Senior, there was indeed starlight in that person's body at the back. I was the closest to him so I could sense it." Heaven Immortal Cold Light's expression softened. Shangguan Qian did not know this drunkard at all. Given her status and cultivation, there was no way she would lie about this. Furthermore, an additional person for the entrance trial of Astral Sect made no difference. Without hesitation, Heaven Immortal Cold Light took out a sect badge and asked, "Name?" "Mo Ling." Naturally, Su Zimo would not reveal his true name. Instead, he mentioned the name he used when he lay dormant in the capital of Great Zhou in Tianhuang Mainland. Heaven Immortal Cold Light's spirit consciousness moved. The words Mo Ling had already appeared on the badge in his hands. On the other side of the badge were the words Inner Sect, representing Inner Sect disciples. Su Zimo received the sect badge and grinned. "It's truly a blessing to join Astral Sect. What a great honor." As he said that, he took out a wine jar from his storage bag and raised his head to drink heartily, ignoring the gazes of others. "Mo Ling." Suddenly, Shangguan Qian's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. "I know that you were the one who caused the commotion on the stargazing platform earlier on." After saying that, Shangguan Qian fixed her gaze on Su Zimo, wanting to see through him. However, Su Zimo did not pause at all, as though he had not heard anything. He only threw away the wine jar after he finished the wine in one gulp. With a flushed face and dazed eyes, he approached Shangguan Qian. "Hee." Su Zimo laughed and said mysteriously, "You're right. I did it. Impressive, right?" When Shangguan Qian saw the drunken Su Zimo approaching, she could not help but reveal a disgusted expression and retreat a few steps. She looked at Su Zimo, who seemed to be in a daze, and her guess wavered. The reason why she spoke up for Su Zimo previously so that he could join Astral Sect smoothly was because she was suspicious of him. What Shangguan Qian said earlier on was merely a test. If Su Zimo pretended not to hear or revealed anything unusual, it would prove that her guess was right. But now, this person was openly admitting to it, causing Shangguan Qian to hesitate internally. This person is delirious and crazy. He's most likely bragging about himself after getting drunk. At that thought, Shangguan Qian ignored Su Zimo and retreated to the side with the Shangguan clansmen behind her. When Lin Ming and Xie Tianfeng saw this, they sneered with unfriendly expressions, seemingly plotting something. What's wrong with that person? Zhuo Zhuxian noticed the abnormality on Shangguanqian's side and asked softly. Nothing much. Shangguanqian shook her head gently. I must have thought too much. Chapter 2050, Alkaid. Chapter 2050, Alkaid. Before daybreak, the entrance trial for Astral Sect was already over. Although there were 100,000 cultivators, there were less than 10,000 who could join Astral Sect in the end. Even so, that was a massive number. After Sect Master Astral Rain and the elders saw that the entrance trial was extremely smooth and there were no more strange movements, they left first. Follow me. Heaven Immortal Cold Light summoned a gigantic immortal boat and carried the thousands of cultivators behind him into the sect. There are many array formations and restrictions in Astral Sect. You have to wear your sect badges at all times. Otherwise, there's a high chance that you'll fall into a formation and attract the attacks of the restrictions. Heaven Immortal Cold Light stood on the deck of the immortal boat and walked through Astral Sect, pointing to the surrounding mountains, terrain and ancient structures as he introduced. Astral Sect was way too huge. Even the lowest level black grade sects of the upper world were more than 10 times larger than any sect in the lower worlds. The 7 main peaks of Astral Sect alone made one feel insignificant. When they approached, every single main peak was majestic and towered into the clouds, overshadowing the mountain ranges beneath their feet. When they arrived at the foot of the mountains, they were as insignificant as ants compared to the main peaks before them. The mountains that surrounded each main peak were connected and extended for 50 kilometers, almost forming a mountain range. The area formed by the 7 main peaks alone was unimaginably vast. The 7 peaks are Dubhe, Merak, Fekta, Megrez, Alioth, Mizar and Alkaid. The Earth Immortals among you can choose one of the 7 main peaks and either open up or look for a cave abode to reside within. Heaven Immortal Cold Light said. Su Zimo released his spirit consciousness and sensed. The heaven and earth essence chi surrounding the 7 main peaks was clearly much richer than the other regions. It would definitely be better if they could cultivate on the main peaks. It did not matter which main peak it was. Su Zimo thought for a moment and rode on his flying sword, speeding towards the back of the 7 main peaks. He would have a lot of time to understand some of the rules of the sect in the future. Right now, the most important thing for him was to find a cave abode and cultivate in seclusion. Junior sister Shangguan, which main peak will you choose? Lin Ming asked with a smile. What he meant was that he wanted to choose the same main peak as Shangguanqian so that it would be more convenient for them to interact. Shangguanqian glanced at Su Zimo who was leaving and pondered for a moment. I haven't settled on one yet. I'll take a look around first. With that said, she left Heaven Immortal Cold Light's immortal boat and headed towards the back of the 7 main peaks, maintaining a distance from Su Zimo. Junior sister Shangguan, wait for me. Xie Tianfeng shouted and chased hurriedly. Lin Ming followed closely behind. Brother Wang, aren't you going to chase after them? Zhuo Zhuxian looked at the motionless Wang Yu with a calm expression and asked with a smile. No. Senior brother Zhuo, please. Wang Yu shook his head gently and looked at the main peak named Dubhe on the left of the 7 main peaks. With a leap, he sped forward. Zhuo Zhuxian pondered for a moment before chasing after Shangguanqian. Naturally, Su Zimo could sense the actions of Shangguanqian and the others behind him. However, he did not care and arrived at the end of the 7 main peaks. Main Peak Alkaid. This will do. Su Zimo arrived at Main Peak Alkaid and ascended. Higher on the main peak were the cave abodes of Heaven Immortal experts or elders of the sect. Su Zimo circled around the middle of the peak and caught sight of an empty cave abode. Above the cave abode were the words, 1,000 miles. It should be the name of the previous owner of the cave abode. Su Zimo could not be bothered to modify it and entered the cave abode directly. He casually released a few lesser immortal arts and cleaned up the place. Actually, such a thing should be done by some servants. Although Su Zimo was only a grade 1 Earth Immortal, he was already qualified to recruit some servants in the upper world. However, he had too many secrets on him and there was no need for that. After a simple clean-up, Su Zimo began to draw formation patterns at the entrance of the cave abode to set up an array formation. This seclusion might take a long time. He would not allow anyone to disturb him during this period of time. On the other side, Shangguan had already noticed that Su Zimo had entered Main Peak Alkaid. She lingered between the 7 main peaks for a while before arriving at Main Peak Alkaid to look for a cave abode to stay in. Her suspicions towards Su Zimo were not completely resolved. After all, on the stargazing platform earlier on, she could clearly sense a terrifying power burst forth from Su Zimo's body before the starlight burst forth. Naturally, Lin Ming and Xie Tianfeng arrived at Main Peak Alkaid as well. They found a cave abode beside Shangguan cave abode and stayed there. When Zhuo Zhuxian saw that, he smiled gently and entered Main Peak Mizar that was beside Main Peak Alkaid to stay. Naturally, he had to tidy up after moving into the cave abode. The Shangguan, Lin and Xie Black Immortal clansmen who joined Astral Sect fulfilled the role of servants and began to set up their cave abodes under the lead of Shangguan and the other 2. Pill Refinement Chamber, Cultivation Chamber, Weapon Refinement Chamber, Spirit Beast Chamber, Immortal Herbs Medicinal Field. 3 days had passed since everything was set up. Xie Tianfeng looked at his cave abode in satisfaction. The moment he was free, he thought of Shangguan. At the thought of Shangguan, he could not help but think of that drunkard. Humph! Xie Tianfeng harumphed. You've offended junior sister Shangguan time and again. I'll teach you a lesson right now. Xie Tianfeng had everything planned well. He was prepared to teach Su Zimo a lesson and bring him to Shangguan. That way, he would have a logical excuse to visit Shangguan and even check out her cave abode. If I can enter junior sister Shangguan's cave abode. The corners of Xie Tianfeng's mouth curled up as he laughed evilly, letting his imagination run wild. A moment later, he could no longer hold it in. With a burning heart, he rushed out of his cave abode and sprinted towards Su Zimo's cave abode. Before long, he arrived before Su Zimo's cave abode. There was already someone standing there. Lin Ming. Xie Tianfeng was not the only one with those thoughts. What are you standing here for? Xie Tianfeng frowned slightly. He and Lin Ming represented their respective family clans and both wanted to be Dao companions with the most outstanding woman of the Shangguan clan in this generation. That would be equivalent to a union of their 2 major factions and family clans. Therefore, both of them disliked the other. Lin Ming pointed to the cave abode in front of him and said with a fake smile, "That drunkard is inside. Brother Xie, please." Xie Tianfeng was no fool and immediately realized that something was amiss. Narrowing his gaze slightly, he released his spirit consciousness and scanned the surroundings of the cave abode. He could not help but frown and mutter softly, "Array formation?" Lin Ming harumphed coldly as well. That drunkard is not simple. He set up such an array formation in 3 days. Chapter 2051. Fleeting Time. Chapter 2051. Fleeting Time. What should we do? Xie Tianfeng frowned and asked, "Can you dispel this formation?" "I don't know about array formations." Lin Ming shook his head gently before smiling. "Why don't you release your divine powers and secret skills to shatter this array formation, Brother Xie?" Both of them were grade 7 Earth Immortals and their cultivation realms far surpassed Su Zimo. Although they knew nothing about array formations, there was still a high chance that they could dispel it forcefully. Xie Tianfeng thought about it but did not make a move. This was the middle of Main Peak Alkaid after all. If he forcefully dispelled the formation, it would definitely cause quite a stir. Attacking the cave abodes of fellow cultivators was a serious matter. If the sect elders were to punish them, it would not be worth it. Xie Tianfeng sneered. "What's my status? Is there a need for me to teach a drunkard a lesson personally? I don't believe that he can continue hiding in his cave abode." "That's true. Let's just send someone to keep watch." Lin Ming nodded as well. The 2 of them reached a rare agreement and dispersed. In the cave abode, Su Zimo ignored the 2 people outside and had already begun his seclusion cultivation. There were way too many things he wanted to cultivate in this seclusion. Apart from raising his cultivation realm, he also had to study the Void Thunder Manual, Prajna Nirvana Sutra, Divine Elephant Breathing Technique and the Black Tortoise Secret Skill as well as the mysteries of the Trinity Auspicious Jade. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and decided to cultivate the sutra on the third wall of the Hell Suppression tripod first to perfect the Prajna Nirvana Sutra. The Prajna Nirvana Sutra was a taboo mystic classic. When Su Zimo was at the Black Essence Realm, it could help him use Essence Spirit Stones to cultivate. If it was more perfect, his cultivation speed would definitely increase. Furthermore, up till now, this taboo mystic classic was his foundation after ascending to the upper world and was also the cultivation technique he mainly cultivated. Su Zimo took out the Hell Suppression tripod and injected his spirit consciousness into the third tripod wall. The Sanskrit words on it gradually lit up. Those Sanskrit words were extremely complicated. It took a lot of mental energy to cultivate. Thankfully, Su Zimo had the foundation of the first two sections and his cultivation was much smoother. Time flew. No matter how many cultivators came and went outside the cave abode and what happened in the sect, Su Zimo was unmoved and remained in seclusion. Under normal circumstances, if cultivators wanted to obtain essence spirit stones in the sect, they could only complete some missions assigned by the sect and accumulate contribution points in exchange for some cultivation resources. However, Su Zimo did not need it at all. In the spirit mine previously, Absolute Thunder City and the Emperor's Tomb, he experienced countless battles. Just by picking up the storage bags of others, he had accumulated many essence spirit stones, essence condensation pills and many other resources. In the blink of an eye, 329 years had passed since Su Zimo entered seclusion. In the cave abode, there were around 10 essence spirit stones beside Su Zimo. His body emitted 10 hair-like golden threads that entered the 10 essence spirit stones and absorbed the heaven and earth essence chi within. The heaven and earth essence chi around him intensified and the entire cave abode turned misty like a paradise. Suddenly, Su Zimo shuddered and his aura surged. Opening his eyes, he took a deep breath and devoured the surrounding mist. The entire cave abode regained its clarity. Level 2 Earth Essence Realm. If anyone knew that he had advanced another level in the Earth Essence Realm in just more than 300 years, their jaws would definitely drop. The main reason why he could reach that speed was because the third wall of the Hell Suppression tripod had perfected the Prajna Nirvana Sutra. Right now, Su Zimo could absorb and refine 10 essence spirit stones at the same time with the help of the Prajna Nirvana Sutra. This increased his cultivation speed significantly. Because of his previous experience in Absolute Thunder City, the Emperor's Tomb and the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range, he had benefited immensely and broke through to the Level 2 Earth Essence Realm without encountering any obstacles. Not only that, there was a secret skill of the Buddhist monasteries on the third wall of the Hell Suppression tripod, at the end of the Sanskrit. It was a dermic seal. Impermanence seal. All things are impermanent, this is the law of arising and passing away. The Sanskrit of the dermic seal was extremely profound and difficult to understand. Whenever Su Zimo was free, he would comprehend the direction of the dermic seal. Although he learned something, he did not comprehend it completely. The first two sections of the Prajna Nirvana Sutra cultivated dermic formulations, and only the third section had a secret skill inheritance. There was no doubt that a secret skill of a taboo mystic classic definitely possessed unimaginable might. 10 years ago, Su Zimo received a connection from the martial Tao prime body. Tao Yao had ascended. Initially, Tao Yao wanted to stay by the side of the martial Tao prime body. However, the resources of the lower worlds were scarce. Using the martial Tao furnace, the martial Tao prime body could refine King Yun Yu's Tao fruit bit by bit to raise his cultivation. However, Tao Yao did not possess such means. If the two of them ascended at the same time in the future, there was a high chance that they would separate as well. If that was the case, he might as well let Tao Yao ascend to the upper world as soon as possible to adapt to the cruel environment there and raise his cultivation as soon as possible. Tao Yao was extremely reluctant, but he knew that it was useless for him to stay by the side of the martial Tao prime body. The cultivation of the martial Tao prime body increased continuously while he stayed in Tianhuang mainland without advancing at all. The gap between the two of them would only increase in the future. Therefore, Tao Yao ascended 10 years ago and attracted the 3 of 9 heavenly tribulation. Thankfully, he passed it successfully. However, even the martial Tao prime body could not sense which world he ascended to. With Tao Yao's departure, most of Su Zimo's old friends of the past in Tianhuang mainland had already left, apart from some who could not ascend. As time passed by, the era that belonged to the eternal martial emperor gradually came to an end. After Tao Yao left, the martial Dao prime body stood in Pingyang town and looked in the direction of the capital of Great Zhou in silence with a lost expression. After all these years, Ji Yaoshue's cultivation realm was still at the void reversion realm. The martial Dao prime body had once found many spatial nodes of Tianhuang Mainland, and left Tianhuang Mainland to head to other minor kiliocosms to search for countless mysterious treasures that could not be found in Tianhuang Mainland before getting Tao Yao to send them over for Ji Yaoshue to consume. However, Ji Yaoshue's lifespan showed no signs of increasing, and her cultivation realm was stagnant as well. Void reversion Dao beings had a lifespan of 5,000 years. By now, Ji Yaoshue should only have around 2,000 years left to live. The martial Dao prime body stood in silence for a long time before sighing, and returning to his room to cultivate in seclusion. Over the years of cultivation, he had already exhausted many essence spirit stones from the experts of the upper world. Another fate ring had appeared behind him, reaching a total of 6. Through his connection with the green Lotus true body, the martial Dao prime body could roughly guess that the power of the 6 fate rings meant that his strength was around the earth immortal realm. Time was like an arrow and the days flew. After Su Zimo entered level 2 Earth Essence Realm, he continued to enter seclusion. In the 516th year, Su Zimo broke through once more and entered the level 3 Earth Essence Realm. Su Zimo continued cultivating in seclusion. As the sun and moon rotated, the stars revolved. Another few hundred years passed. This day, more than 1,300 years had passed since Su Zimo joined Astral Sect and entered seclusion. Chapter 2052. Change in Tianhuang Mainland. Chapter 2052. Change in Tianhuang Mainland. Tianhuang Mainland. It had been more than 2,000 years since the eternal martial emperor ascended. As the paragons and monster incarnates of that generation ascended one after another, that era had already come to an end. Time passed and times changed. Although it was only slightly more than 2,000 years, because of the coexistence of the 10,000 races created by the eternal martial emperor and the flourishing of the martial Dao, countless paragons appeared in Tianhuang Mainland. However, because of the battle of the 10,000 races and the blood fiend catastrophe, too many experts of the 10,000 races died. If Tianhuang Mainland wanted to truly recover to its peak, it would have to recuperate for a long time. Nobody in Tianhuang Mainland knew that the martial Dao prime body was still in the lower world. At that moment, the martial Dao prime body was searching for treasures in an unknown minor kiliocosm when he suddenly paused and sensed something. The martial Dao prime body turned to look in the direction of Tianhuang Mainland and frowned slightly. He had left behind a few spirit consciousnesses in Tianhuang Mainland and sensed a commotion. Did something happen? The martial Dao of Tianhuang Mainland flourished and the 10,000 races coexisted. Even the primordial races of the past no longer had the same edge. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any threat. However, the martial Dao prime body pondered for a moment and was still worried, deciding to return to Tianhuang Mainland. The minor kiliocosm he was in was far away from Tianhuang Mainland. It would take some time for him to cross the void if he wanted to return. Tianhuang Mainland, extreme west. Suddenly, an incomparably powerful energy fluctuation came from the skies of the Kunlun ruins. Boom, boom, boom. A loud bang reverberated through the clouds and the minor kiliocosm of Tianhuang Mainland trembled slightly. The 4 regions and 1 continent shook. The 3 oceans created raging tides. Experts of Penglai Island and Divine Phoenix Island came out of seclusion one after another. Most of the experts of Tianhuang Mainland sensed something as well, and figures appeared in midair one after another, looking towards the west. A terrifying energy fluctuation burst forth from the skies of the Kunlun ruins. Immediately after, cracks sounded from the world as though something had shattered. The next moment, blinding golden lights burst forth from the direction of the Kunlun ruins and illuminated the world. Pest. The expressions of the experts of Tianhuang Mainland changed as they gasped. If they were not wrong, only a single race could release such a golden light and powerful aura. The God race. Furthermore, there was a spatial node in the Kunlun ruins that was connected to God's mainland. In that case, There was a high chance that the terrifying cracking sound earlier on was the seal of this spatial node that was shattered by the god race. The god race had invaded once more. Tianhuang mainland was shaken. The situation is critical. Where's the Luo Emperor? A shout sounded from midair above Tianhuang mainland. Nobody replied. Where are the other emperors of immortal martial sect? I'm not sure. The emperors and patriarchs of the various races appeared in midair with bewildered expressions. Among them, Lang Ro, Little Fatty, Shi Jian and Ji Qingtian of Ethereal Peak came out of seclusion one after another and arrived in midair. Lang Ro and the other three had yet to reach the Emperor realm, but they had already entered the Ancestor realm. Emperors and patriarchs of the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects appeared. Among the primordial races, the Witch race was destroyed in the Battle of the 10,000 Races and the Bloodvine race was destroyed by Tao Lord Bloodfiend. Right now, there were only 6 primordial races remaining: Gyuro, the Dragon, Barbarian, Kuan, Heavenly Eye, Rakshasa and Golden Crow races. The emperors of the primordial 6 races had already appeared. The emperors of the Dragon race, the Blue Dragon Emperor and Cloud Dragon Emperor, were old friends of the Martial Emperor in the past. The Blue Dragon Emperor was Long Tsong, the 5-clawed divine dragon. The Cloud Dragon Emperor was once the mount of the Martial Emperor, Solitary Cloud. Long Ran had already ascended and the current dragon race was led by Blue Dragon Emperor and Cloud Dragon Emperor. Everyone, come to Heavenly Secrets Palace for a meeting first. Right then, a voice sounded in everyone's ears. The voice came from this generation's storyteller. The storyteller of this generation was once Lin Xuanji's disciple and had already entered the Emperor realm. The emperors of the 10,000 races tore through the void and descended in Heavenly Secrets Palace. What happened? The Barbarian Emperor frowned. The God Empress of the God race has an extremely good relationship with the Eternal Martial Emperor. Why would she suddenly break the seal and barge into Tianhuang mainland? The God Empress that the Barbarian Emperor was referring to was Nian Qi. Little Fatty shook his head. Given Nian Qi's talent and cultivation, she should have ascended to the upper world a long time ago. The God Empress of God's mainland right now should be someone else. What should we do now? There's no sign of the Luo Emperor. I've just checked on Immortal Martial Sect and it's almost empty. The storyteller looked at everyone and asked in a deep voice. The Luo Emperor was an expert that had risen in the past 1,000 years. His name was Luo Ao and he had broken the norm by cultivating both the immortal and martial Daos while possessing a spirit root. His cultivation was unprecedented and he eventually became an emperor. It could be said that after the martial emperor era, the Luo Emperor was the most dazzling monster incarnate. Immortal Martial Sect established by the Luo Emperor recruited more than half of the martial Dao practitioners in Tianhuang mainland, and became the largest sect and faction in Tianhuang mainland. Under normal circumstances, for something like this to happen in Tianhuang mainland, the Luo Emperor should have stood out and led the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland to defend against external enemies. He was the only one with the prestige and strength. But now that the Luo Emperor was gone and Immortal Martial Sect was empty, everyone was at a loss. The Cloud Dragon Emperor had a grim expression. The God race is menacing this time round. They probably won't let things go. In the primordial era, the God race invaded Tianhuang mainland and was hunted down by the divine Ho race in the Kunlun ruins, suffering immense losses. In reality, there was an irreconcilable blood feud between the two continents. It was only because of Nian Qi in the Eternal Martial Emperor era that the relationship between the two continents eased. Now that Nian Qi has ascended and a new emperor is born on God's mainland, there's probably no longer any reservations. Ji Qingtian said in a deep voice. The Blue Dragon Emperor said in a deep voice, "We have no way out and can only fight. There's going to be another unprecedented battle in Tianhuang mainland. At that time, there will be rivers of blood and countless living beings will be destroyed." Sigh. Furthermore, the outcome of this battle is unpredictable, the storyteller sighed. Tianhuang mainland had yet to recover from the battle of the 10,000 races and the Blood Fiend catastrophe. Now, they were about to face such a calamity. It's not impossible. Shi Jian said, for the past 2,000 years, the martial Dao has flourished and almost all the living beings of Tianhuang mainland can cultivate. In terms of our top combat strength, we have the Luo Emperor holding down and presiding over everything. Everyone nodded. At the same time, a bloody battle had already broken out in the Kunlun ruins. The God Race army charged out of the Rainbow Cave in the Kunlun ruins almost endlessly, and every single one of them had a powerful aura. The God Race was innately strong like celestial beings. The men were handsome while the women were peerlessly beautiful. Every single one of the God Race army wore armor and carried long swords on their waists. Wielding spears, they charged continuously at the defense line of the Kunlun ruins. There were tens of thousands of conjoint body mighty figures in the God Race army alone. Among them, there were more than 1,000 patriarchs of the God Race. That number was still increasing. The Kunlun ruins was guarded by the Kunlun race all year round. However, they could not withstand the terrifying attacks of the God Race. The reason why the Kunlun ruins of the primordial era could stop the God Race army was because of the two divine house. More than 2,000 years ago, the reason why the God Race could be stopped was because of the martial emperor and night spirit. But now, there was only a group of Kunlun clansmen left guarding the Kunlun ruins. The defense line of the Kunlun ruins could not last long. Chapter 2053. Luo Emperor. Chapter 2053. Luo Emperor. Corpses were strewn all over the god-slaying valley and blood flowed like rivers. The God Race army seemed to have formed a golden spear that charged through the god-slaying valley continuously as the Kunlun race fought to the death. They could not retreat nor did they dare to. Tianhuang Mainland was behind the Kunlun ruins. Once the Kunlun ruins was lost, the God Race army would charge in and trample all over Tianhuang Mainland. More innocent living beings would die under the gigantic swords and spears of the God Race. Furthermore, all the Kunlun clansmen believed that the reinforcements of the 10,000 races of Tianhuang Mainland would definitely rush over to provide support. In the skies, the three emperors of the Kunlun race fought against an emperor of the God Race. The God Race emperor was extremely young and high-spirited. Although he looked to be less than 20 years old, his blood chi was strong and shone with a resplendent golden light. He could fight against the three emperors bare-handed and even had an absolute advantage. The Kunlun Ancestor Realm experts were also fighting against the many ancestor gods on the other end in a tragic battle. Most humans of the same cultivation realm could not defend against the power of the God Race. This was a natural difference in bloodline and physique. During the Martial Emperor era, most of the paragons and monster incarnates who experienced the Battle of the 10,000 Races, the Blood Fiend catastrophe and other life and death experiences had already ascended. Although Tianhuang Mainland was flourishing and filled with vitality right now, it was only a resting period after the catastrophe and was far inferior to the Martial Emperor era. However, the true top experts of the God Race had yet to appear. Right now, only a young emperor of the God Race had appeared. Even so, the Kunlun race could no longer defend and was forced to retreat in defeat in the God-slaying valley. Before long, their defense line would collapse. Under the lead of experts, the armies of the major factions of Tianhuang Mainland began to gather towards the Kunlun ruins as well with deafening killing sounds. The great Zhou Empire gathered their army rapidly and rushed to the battlefield of the Kunlun ruins as well. Right then, a figure appeared above the Kunlun ruins. The person wore a black robe and did not look old. However, he was tall and mighty, steady as a mountain. He was like a god that could not be offended and exuded a powerful aura that enveloped the eight desolates, causing people to prostrate. After the eternal martial emperor, the emperor with the highest reputation and combat strength in Tianhuang Mainland, Luo Ao. In order to temper his body and cultivate his dermic Tao, he once entered the territories of the primordial races alone and fought against them, escaping unscathed. He cultivated both the immortal and martial Daos and became an emperor in less than 1,000 years. He dominated Tianhuang Mainland and had never tasted defeat among his peers. He established a mortal martial sect, recruited all the geniuses in the world and invited experts of various races. In just 500 years, it became the strongest among the major sects of Tianhuang Mainland. It could be said that the Luo Emperor was the most dazzling legend after the Eternal Martial Emperor era. The Eternal Martial Emperor did not establish a sect and merely took in 2 disciples. Baiming Xue and Carefree were bent on pursuing the Tao and ascended without establishing a sect. As for the Luo Emperor, he would explain the Tao and martial arts every 50 years, attracting many martial Tao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland to follow him. As such, immortal martial sect grew stronger as well. In fact, there were even people who said that although the eternal martial emperor was the one who created the martial Tao, the Luo Emperor was the one who inherited and expounded it, pushing the martial Tao to greater heights and glorifying it. It's the Luo Emperor. The Luo Emperor is here. The Kunlun clansmen and cultivators of the 10,000 races below shouted excitedly when they saw the figure in Verge. The atmosphere in Heavenly Secret's palace was grim. The many emperors and patriarchs who were discussing how to fight sensed something as well, and arrived in midair one after another, looking towards the west. A dazzling figure stood in the skies above the Kunlun ruins that no one could ignore. The Luo Emperor has appeared. The storyteller heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Chengtian nodded slightly as well. With the Luo Emperor around, Tianhuang Mainland will have a chance of fighting. Immortal martial sect led by the Luo Emperor alone is enough for the god race to suffer. Right then, above the Kunlun ruins, the Luo Emperor waved his sleeves gently and an exquisite palace appeared. It expanded continuously and hovered in midair, emitting an incomparably domineering aura. It's the immortal martial palace of the Luo Emperor. The Cloud Dragon Emperor said, by the looks of it, the cultivators of immortal martial sect should be in the immortal martial palace. However, I wonder what's the meaning of the Luo Emperor's actions. Just as everyone was discussing, cultivators from the immortal martial palace walked out one after another. However, many of them had ugly expressions. They looked despondent and dazed. Strange. Suddenly, Little Fatty grumbled, there seemed to be much less experts in immortal martial sect. The others noticed this as well. Some patriarchs and emperors of immortal martial sect did not appear. It was unknown where they were. Perhaps the Luo Emperor has something else up his sleeves? Shi Jian deduced. Because they were too far away, the experts of Heavenly Secret's palace could not see the expressions of the many cultivators in the immortal martial palace. Let's pass down the order to gather experts of our sects so that we can move as soon as possible to the Kunlun ruins to fight against the god race. The storyteller said in a deep voice. All right. Many experts tore through the void and returned to their sect's territories to gather their experts before heading towards the Kunlun ruins. At the same time, above the Kunlun ruins, the Luo Emperor looked at the many immortal martial sect cultivators that walked out and said indifferently, let's attack. Before long, a group of cultivators stood out from the crowd and headed towards the battlefield murderously. The Kunlun clansmen were even more invigorated when they saw that. The Luo Emperor glanced at the remaining immortal martial sect cultivators and shook his head. Today is a foregone conclusion. There's no way out for you guys. You only have a chance to survive if you listen to my orders. The moment he said that, the Luo Emperor arrived on the Emperor battlefield in the skies in a flash. The three Kunlun emperors could no longer withstand the charge of the young god race emperor. Now that the Luo Emperor had arrived, they were finally relieved. Luo Emperor, watch out. This person. A Kunlun emperor had just spoken. Before he could finish, the Luo Emperor punched him on the back. Bang! The Kunlun emperor's eyes widened and he had a stunned expression. His eyes were filled with confusion, doubt and disbelief. The next moment, the body of the Kunlun emperor exploded into a blood mist. His essence spirit was shattered by the power of the Luo Emperor's punch as well. The other two Kunlun emperors were stunned. The Luo Emperor did not stop and slapped the second Kunlun emperor heavily on the face. The emperor's head exploded and his essence spirit was destroyed. In less than a breath, two Kunlun emperors died in the hands of the Luo Emperor. Luo Emperor, you! The last Kunlun emperor had just reacted with a furious expression when he felt a sharp pain in his chest. A gigantic golden fist burst forth from his body and ruptured his heart. The young god race emperor sneered and exerted strength in both hands, tearing the Kunlun emperor's body into two. The emperor's essence spirit transformed into a streak of light, wanting to escape. The Luo Emperor's gaze shifted to the essence spirit of the Kunlun emperor. The person's essence spirit paused immediately. Crack, crack, crack. The next moment, the essence spirit of the Kunlun emperor shattered and he died. Chapter 2054. True Calamity. Chapter 2054. True Calamity. In the blink of an eye, 3 Kunlun emperors died in the hands of the Luo Emperor. The blood of emperors dyed the skies of the Kunlun ruins red. The many Kunlun patriarchs who were still fighting the ancestor gods in midair were stunned and could not react for a moment. Right then, the patriarchs of immortal martial sect descended with many martial Dao practitioners and charged into the crowd, starting a massacre against the Kunlun race. Dermic arts, divine powers and dermic treasures burst forth and created a bloodstorm in the god-slaying valley. The defense line of the Kunlun race guarding the god-slaying valley was already in danger against the charge of the god race army. But now the many martial Dao experts of immortal martial sect charged over from behind, causing the Kunlun race to be attacked from both sides and their defense line to collapse instantly. In just 10 breaths, countless Kunlun clansmen died, filled with endless grievances. Even till their deaths, the living beings guarding the borders of Tianhuang Mainland did not know why the Luo Emperor and immortal martial sect attacked them. The god-slaying valley was lost. The Luo Emperor looked at the remaining martial Dao experts beside the immortal martial palace and narrowed his eyes slightly, saying slowly, "Why? You guys still refuse to attack?" Sigh. An ancestor realm martial Dao practitioner sighed and descended from midair, charging towards the Tianhuang Mainland cultivators on the other side of the Kunlun ruins. When they saw that, the other martial Dao practitioners of immortal martial sect attacked as well. Many sect cultivators who had just arrived in the Kunlun ruins were shocked when they saw that. Half of the martial Dao experts in Tianhuang Mainland joined immortal martial sect and were under the Luo Emperor. But now these martial Dao experts had changed their allegiances and were charging towards them. "Fellow Daoist Lin, what are you doing? The god race army is in the god-slaying valley. Why are you attacking people from Tianhuang Mainland?" A cultivator was enraged and could not help but question loudly. "Junior Sister Yuan, are you crazy?" Someone shouted. When the martial Dao experts of immortal martial sect heard that, their eyes revealed guilt. However, they gritted their teeth and continued the massacre. Initially, they were all from Tianhuang Mainland. Now that they were in danger from the god race invasion, they fought among themselves and killed one another. Instantly, the killing sounds of the Kunlun ruins shook the skies and wails could be heard. The emperors of Heavenly Secrets Palace, Sword Sect, Azura Sect, Diamond Monastery, Divine Phoenix Island and the other major sects and factions as well as the 10,000 races had just gathered their experts and were prepared to head to the Kunlun ruins to fight the god race when they saw that. The emperors were shocked and could not help but feel a chill. How could this be? The storyteller looked at the tragedy in the Kunlun ruins in a daze and could not recover for a moment. There was only a single thought in his mind. However, that speculation was way too terrifying and he could not believe it. The Luo Emperor has already betrayed Tianhuang Mainland. The Blue Dragon Emperor's eyes were filled with endless killing intent as he grit his teeth and said hatefully. Lung Ro was still unwilling to believe and murmured, "That can't be, right? Perhaps this Luo Emperor is disguised by someone from the god race?" Impossible. Little Fatty shook his head. Immortal martial sect has 10 emperors. How can they not see through Luo Ao's true body if this is someone from the god race disguised as him? To think that the Luo Emperor would choose to side with the god race at this critical juncture. Ji Qingtian clenched his fists in pain. Shi Jian frowned. Even if the Luo Emperor is so vicious, everyone in immortal martial sect cultivates the martial Dao. Why would they betray Tianhuang Mainland along with him? The era of the eternal martial emperor has passed after all. The storyteller shook his head. This generation is the era of the Luo Emperor. In immortal martial sect, many martial Dao practitioners benefited from the Luo Emperor's martial arts and Dao discussions and are his followers. Time passed and eras changed. The eternal martial emperor ascended and was no longer in Tianhuang Mainland, causing his influence to weaken day by day. However, the rise of the new emperor affected the entire Tianhuang Mainland. However, no matter how influential the Luo Emperor is, there's no way all the martial Dao practitioners of immortal martial sect will follow him in the betrayal. Lung Ro said. Suddenly, the Cloud Dragon Emperor said, "Nearly half of the cultivators in immortal martial sect have vanished. I reckon that those are the cultivators who resisted the Luo Emperor, and are most likely doomed." Ah! The emperors were shocked. Initially, everyone was energized. However, when they saw the Luo Emperor's betrayal, They knew one thing. The true calamity of Tianhuang Mainland had arrived. This time round, it was even more terrifying than the Blood Fiend catastrophe and the ancient war. In the ancient era there was the human emperor. More than 2,000 years ago, there was the martial emperor. But now, the Luo Emperor, who was the only thing Tianhuang Mainland could rely on, had suddenly changed sides and joined forces with the god race. The Luo Emperor was the strongest emperor after the eternal martial emperor era. He comprehended 6 supreme divine powers and was comparable to the ancient human emperor. None of the emperors present were his match. Immortal Martial Sect was the largest faction in Tianhuang Mainland. Even if they lost half of their experts, their strength was far from what the major sects and factions could match. Furthermore, half of the martial Dao experts in the world were under the Luo Emperor's lead. How could they fight this battle? Let's go to the Kunlun ruins and fight the god race. The Blue Dragon Emperor said in a deep voice. That's right, I want to ask the Luo Emperor why he betrayed Tianhuang Mainland after cultivating the martial Dao. Tian said in a deep voice. Although everyone's hearts were heavy, they did not give up and led their armies to descend in the Kunlun ruins. At that moment, the Kunlun ruins had already turned into mountains of corpses and rivers of blood with bodies strewn everywhere and a torrential blood qi. The god race army increased. 8 emperors of the god race had already appeared. The Tianhuang Mainland army could not defend against it at all and was completely defeated, leaving behind the corpses of millions of living beings. The Kunlun ruins was lost. The Cloud Dragon Emperor, Little Fatty, Storyteller and the other emperors arrived with experts of their respective sections. When they saw that, they were filled with pain and shock. In midair, the Luo Emperor had an indifferent expression, as though the lives of millions of living beings beneath his feet were not worth mentioning. Luo Ao, look what you've done! The Cloud Dragon Emperor hollered with a furious expression. Why? Although Tian was only at the Ancestor Realm, he stood out at that moment and questioned the Luo Emperor loudly. Desolate Martial established a Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. You cultivated the Martial Emperor's inheritance. Why did you betray Tianhuang Mainland and become the butcher's knife of the god race to massacre the living beings of Tianhuang Mainland? The Martial Emperor's inheritance. Suddenly, Luo Ao smiled and looked at the Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others. I want to ask everyone who among the emperors of this generation can fight me. The Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others were silent. Among them, they had only comprehended 5 supreme divine powers at most. As for Luo Ao, he had comprehended 6 supreme divine powers and cultivated both the immortal and martial Dao. His combat strength was terrifying and no one was his match. Luo Ao continued, given my combat strength, even in the primordial era, I would have been a top-tier expert. I'm comparable to the human emperor and martial emperor. So what? The storyteller said in a deep voice, the human emperor and martial emperor once made everlasting meritorious deeds for Tianhuang Mainland to be admired for all eternity. No matter how strong you are, you're still a sinner of Tianhuang Mainland. Ha 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 ha. Luo Ao burst into laughter and looked at the Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others coldly. You can't blame me. It's because Tianhuang Mainland can't accommodate me. You guys were the ones who forced me to do this. Chapter 2055. On the Verge. Chapter 2055. On the Verge. Bullshit. The Cloud Dragon Emperor sneered. Initially, you were the leader of the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland. The major sects and factions were led by your immortal martial sect and even Heavenly Secrets Palace was only second. When has Tianhuang Mainland not accommodated you? How did we force you? The Cloud Dragon Emperor was not the only one. Even the other emperors and patriarchs were puzzled and did not know why Luo Ao said that. Only the storyteller frowned slightly, as though he recalled something. Fufu, you've forgotten so quickly? Luo Ao sneered at the Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others. The storyteller asked slowly, you're referring to the matter of you wanting to be conferred the Martial Emperor title back then? Back when Luo Ao was conferred the title of Emperor, he wanted to be conferred the title of the Martial Emperor. However, he was stopped by the storyteller, the Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others. Although Luo Ao was the most dazzling paragon and monster incarnate after the Eternal Martial Emperor era, he was far inferior to the martial emperor in terms of experience and combat strength. Thereafter, Luo Ao held martial arts and Dao discussions, attracting many martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland to follow him. Immortal martial sect grew stronger by the day. As for Luo Ao, his cultivation of the immortal and martial Daos advanced as well. Before long, he comprehended 6 supreme divine powers. His combat strength was comparable to the human emperor. Luo Ao took the initiative to mention once more that he wanted to be conferred the title of the martial emperor. At that moment, no one in Tianhuang Mainland was his match in terms of combat strength. However, when the emperors gathered, almost no one agreed to this matter. Even the primordial races that had a blood feud with the martial emperor did not agree to this matter, and the emperors still dissuaded Luo Ao from giving up on the title of martial emperor. In everyone's hearts, there was only a single martial emperor in Tianhuang Mainland, Su Zimo. Although Luo Ao's later accomplishments were great, it was difficult for him to take on the title of the martial emperor. At that time, Luo Ao and the emperors parted on bad terms. Now that the storyteller was bringing up the past, the emperors were slightly stunned. Could it be because of this that Luo Ao actually allowed a predator into Tianhuang Mainland to massacre the masses? I can't even get my hands on the title of the martial emperor, and yet you claim that I'm the leader. Luo Ao sneered. The Blue Dragon Emperor cursed. What a lunatic. You're going to betray Tianhuang Mainland and the human race just because you're not allowed to be the martial emperor? I'm not a human to begin with, so how can I betray you? Luo Ao said indifferently. Half of the god race's blood flows through my body. However, none of you know about it. The emperors were shocked. This fact of Luo Ao had actually been hidden from everyone. With that, it was easy to understand why Luo Ao could rise in Tianhuang Mainland in such a short period of time and become an emperor. I don't have any prejudice towards the human race or the god race. I grew up in Tianhuang Mainland, and in the depths of my heart, my feelings for Tianhuang Mainland are even deeper. Luo Ao shook his head. However, I'm way too disappointed that you guys stopped me from being conferred the title of the martial emperor twice. You guys were the ones who pushed me towards the god race. The calamity of Tianhuang Mainland today was all because of you guys. Ha ha. Little Fatty sneered. What a joke. You broke off ties with Tianhuang Mainland and abandoned the masses just because of a title. That proves that our actions back then were not wrong. You're not worthy of the title of the martial emperor. Luo Ao glared at Little Fatty and said coldly, whether I'm worthy or not is not decided by you. Half of the martial Dao experts in Tianhuang Mainland are under my lead. Once you guys die, I'll be the martial emperor. Where are the others from Immortal Martial Sect? Although the storyteller had already guessed it, he could not help but ask, where's the Nether Emperor, Dragon Martial Emperor, Xueqi Emperor and the others? Including Luo Ao, there were a total of 10 emperors in Immortal Martial Sect. But now, there were only 6 left behind Luo Ao. When the 6 emperors of Immortal Martial Sect heard that, their expressions dimmed and they lowered their heads. Luo Ao smiled and said casually, I gathered all the cultivators of Immortal Martial Sect in the Immortal Martial Palace. The Immortal Martial Palace is my destiny dermic treasure. Inside, I can kill all living beings within with a single thought. Anyone who resisted me was buried in the Immortal Martial Palace. Many martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland were enraged when they heard that. Luo Ao, you cultivated the inheritance of the martial emperor but abandoned Tianhuang Mainland. You forgot your roots and massacred people of the martial Dao wantonly. You're truly inferior to pigs and dogs. A martial Dao patriarch could not help but stand out and curse. Luo Ao's gaze shifted to the martial Dao patriarch. Watch out! The Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others hurriedly reminded, but it was too late. The glabella of the martial Dao patriarch was pierced by Luo Ao's gaze and his essence spirit was destroyed, dying on the spot. Luo Ao's attack came without any warning and the Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others could not save him in time. Luo Ao, there are millions of martial Dao practitioners in Tianhuang Mainland. Can you kill all of them? Luo Ao, you've forgotten your roots and are inferior to pigs and dogs. You're not even worthy of carrying the martial emperor's shoes. Not only did Luo Ao's killing power fail to intimidate the cultivators of Tianhuang Mainland, More and more martial Dao practitioners stood out and shouted. Instantly, the Tianhuang Mainland army was worked up and their shouts shook the skies, waiting for the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland to give the order. You only have two options. Submit or die. Luo Ao looked at the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland and shook his head gently with a disdainful expression. Who among you is a match for me? Furthermore, there's the God Race army behind me. The emperors knew that Tianhuang Mainland was most likely doomed for this battle as well. However, how could everyone from Tianhuang Mainland submit without a fight? The emperors looked at a mortal martial sect behind Luo Ao. If they could convince those cultivators of a mortal martial sect to stand on the side of Tianhuang Mainland, they might stand a chance. However, the remaining martial Dao practitioners of a mortal martial sect were either indebted to Luo Ao or fearful of his methods. Who would dare to stand out? The truly hot-blooded immortal martial sect martial Dao practitioners who did not fear death had already been killed by Luo Ao. Lung Ro looked at the 6 emperors of a mortal martial sect behind Luo Ao, and the many martial Dao experts of a mortal martial sect. How many of you don't have spirit roots and are able to cultivate and obtain your current achievements because the martial emperor established his Dao? Everyone from immortal martial sect was silent. The 6 emperors averted their gazes and did not even dare to meet the gazes of those from Tianhuang Mainland. Leng Ro continued, as people of Tianhuang Mainland and have cultivated the martial Dao, how can you guys help the evildoers without distinguishing between right and wrong? There was a stir in immortal martial sect, but it was not obvious. Although many martial Dao practitioners were shaken, no one dared to stand out against Luo Ao's might. The peak emperor of immortal martial sect sighed. I know that you're right, but it's all thanks to the Luo Emperor's guidance that I'm able to obtain my current accomplishments. The peak emperor lowered his head and could not continue. His heart was in immense pain. Another Crimson Emperor spoke with a dim expression. It's not that we don't know what's right or wrong, but the Luo Emperor saved my life back then. Luo Ao, what are you waiting for? Right then, the young God Race Emperor led the God Race army and sped over with a torrential aura. At that moment, 8 emperors of the God Race had already arrived in Tianhuang Mainland. Luo Ao looked at the people from Tianhuang Mainland opposite him with a cold expression. He raised his palms slowly and was prepared to give the order. The battle was on the verge. Chapter 2056, Martial Emperor's Badge. Chapter 2056, Martial Emperor's Badge. All martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland, listen up. Right then, a voice sounded from behind the Tianhuang Mainland army. A dignified woman in light yellow robes strode through the void with a green badge in her hands. She walked towards the front of the battlefield with a resolute gaze. The woman's robe was already a little old and its color was even a little pale. However, it could not conceal her noble aura. The Empress of Great Zhou? Sister Yaoxue. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland recognized the woman right away. The Empress of Great Zhou, Ji Yaoxue. After many years, Ji Yaoxue's cultivation realm did not increase much and she was only at the Void Reversion realm. However, she did not show any fear against the encirclement of emperors and patriarchs. Sister Yaoxue, what are you doing here? Little Fatty hurried over and said in a deep voice, a huge battle is about to break out here. It's too dangerous. Everyone did not have a deep relationship with Ji Yaoxue. However, Little Fatty and the others knew that Ji Yaoxue had a close relationship with Su Zimo in the past and could not bear to involve her in this matter. I'm here to send this badge. Ji Yaoxue picked up the green badge in her hands and raised it above her head, shouting, the Martial Emperor's badge is here. All the martial Dao practitioners in the world, heed my orders. Everyone could clearly see the words Desolate Martial written on the green badge. The Martial Emperor's badge. In the cultivation world, there had always been rumors that before the Martial Emperor ascended, he left a badge for his eldest disciple, Baiming Xue. That badge was known by later generations as the Martial Emperor's badge. It was said in the cultivation world that after Baiming Xue ascended, the badge disappeared. Nobody expected such an important badge to be in the hands of the Empress of Great Zhou. Nobody knew what the Martial Emperor's badge was used for. However, that badge had an extremely important symbolic meaning for the martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland. Seeing the badge was akin to seeing the martial emperor arrive personally. The martial emperor's badge was connected to the martial emperor the same way the human emperor's palace was connected to the human emperor. Many martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland were invigorated when they saw the badge. The green badge seemed to emit a strange demonic power that made many martial Dao practitioners fearless and could press forward. Why the martial Dao? Ji Yaoxue looked at the many martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland and Immortal Martial Sect and asked softly. Before everyone could reply, Ji Yaoxue continued, I've never cultivated the martial Dao. However, I heard from the martial emperor that the most important thing for the martial Dao is not the dermic formulation, but the intent and will of the martial Dao. Although Ji Yaoxue was only at the void reversion realm, she wielded the martial emperor's badge and all the martial Dao practitioners in the world listened quietly. Many martial Dao practitioners looked at the martial emperor's badge with a burning gaze, as though they had returned to the passionate times when they entered the path of cultivation and cultivated the martial Dao. Suddenly, the situation changed. For some unknown reason, Luo Ao felt extremely uneasy. He realized that he had to retrieve the martial emperor's badge and not let Ji Yaoxue continue. Die! In a flash, Luo Ao arrived beside Ji Yaoxue and golden blood qi burst forth from his body. In fact, he did not even conceal his god race bloodline as he threw out a punch, wanting to kill Ji Yaoxue on the spot. Luo Ao did not hold back at all in that punch. Ji Yaoxue was only a void reversion Dao being, and could not defend against the attack of an emperor at all. The wind produced by Luo Ao's punch alone was enough to blow her to death. Swoosh! Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Ji Yaoxue. This time round, the Cloud Dragon Emperor was long prepared. The moment Luo Ao moved, he had already blocked in front of Ji Yaoxue and released his blood qi at the same time, transforming into his dragon true body. His massive dragon body protected Ji Yaoxue tightly behind him. At the same time, the Cloud Dragon Emperor channeled his essence spirit and released a secret skill, extending his sharp dragon claws as well. Bang! The fist and claw collided. The Cloud Dragon Emperor's face was pale. Before he even took a half step back, the sound of bones cracking could be heard from his body and the dragon scales on his body began to fall off continuously. His dragon body exploded and blood spurted out. Poof! The Cloud Dragon Emperor's expression darkened as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His life force was almost dispersed by Luo Ao's punch. The difference in strength between the two of them was way too great. If the Cloud Dragon Emperor had retreated and thought of a way to neutralize Luo Ao's punch, he might not have suffered such serious injuries. However, Ji Yaoxue was behind him. He could not retreat at all. Luo Ao was enraged and was about to attack when Little Fatty, the storyteller and the other emperors of Tianhuang Mainland attacked one after another, releasing a series of supreme divine powers that descended in an overwhelming manner. Although Luo Ao had comprehended 6 supreme divine powers, he did not dare to take on so many Dao divine powers and secret skills head-on. He could only retreat and avoid the attack temporarily. The 6 emperors of Immortal Martial Sect who were supposed to help him did not move. They were not the only ones. Be it the martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland or Immortal Martial Sect, everyone was asking themselves internally. Why the martial Dao? What was the martial Dao? Looking at the severely injured Cloud Dragon Emperor, Ji Yaoxue shouted with tears in her eyes, the martial Dao is courage and fearlessness. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Ji Yaoxue wielded the martial emperor's badge and continued, the martial Dao advances courageously and is true to one's heart. The martial Dao is filled with pride and allows one to exact revenge and repay gratitude as they please. The martial Dao is unyielding, resisting and possessing the boldness to go against millions of people. With every word that Ji Yaoxue said, the blood of the martial Dao practitioners present stirred. When the final word was said, many martial Dao practitioners regained their initial fighting spirits and their blood boiled as they could not help but roar into the skies. The billions of martial Dao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland released unshakable wills that eventually gathered into a ball and swept in all directions like raging tides. When she saw that, Ji Yaoxue wielded the martial emperor's badge and shouted, Luo Ao betrayed Tianhuang Mainland and forgot his roots. Today, I hold this badge and invite all the martial Dao practitioners in the world to make him our common enemy. Invite all the martial Dao practitioners in the world to make him our common enemy. Those words reverberated through the world in a deafening manner. At that moment, Luo Ao felt an unprecedented pressure. At the same time, endless hatred and indignance surged in his heart. He had painstakingly established a mortal martial sect for many years, but he could not compare to the badge of a person who had ascended for more than 2,000 years. Luo Ao was enraged and emitted a sharp aura. His might enveloped the 8 desolates as he asked coldly, "Who dares to kill me? Kill!" Before his sentence was finished, a shout sounded from behind Luo Ao. The emperor of a mortal martial sect who had initially submitted to him was the first to attack. Luo Ao was alarmed and turned around suddenly, repelling the intruder with a punch. His gaze was sharp as he said slowly, "Crimson Emperor, how dare you try and kill me?" "Luo Ao, it's true that you saved my life," the Crimson Emperor said in a deep voice. "However, you shouldn't have invited a predator and abandoned Tianhuang Mainland. After today, no matter the outcome, I'll commit suicide and return you my life." The Crimson Emperor's words were filled with an indomitable determination. The Peak Emperor stood out as well and looked at the Cloud Dragon Emperor, Storyteller and the other emperors of Tianhuang Mainland. "The 6 of us will do our best to hold back Luo Ao. As for the God race, we can only leave them to you guys." All right. The emperors of Tianhuang Mainland were invigorated. Ji Yaoxue appeared on the battlefield with the Martial Emperor's badge and caused all the martial Dao practitioners of a mortal martial sect to return to the side of Tianhuang Mainland. Chapter 2057. Arrival of the God Emperor. Chapter 2057. Arrival of the God Emperor. At that moment, the God Race army had already charged over. Their iron hooves were like thunder and carcasses flew with a torrential blood chi. "Kill!" With the Blue Dragon Emperor's order, the cultivators of Tianhuang Mainland and the God Race army collided violently like 2 gigantic waves and blood splattered everywhere. The moment they collided, countless living beings died on the spot. However, the cultivators of Tianhuang Mainland were fearless and pressed forward. No matter their cultivation or combat strength, they possessed an unshakable will at that moment. Fresh blood, limbs, dermic treasures, divine powers, corpses, heads. Everywhere one could see, there was blood and it was extremely tragic. On the side of Tianhuang Mainland, although they had the numbers advantage for the emperors with more than 20 from various factions, they could not gain any advantage against the 8 emperors of the God race. The 6 emperors of a mortal martial sect surrounded Luo Ao and were in danger as well. Luo Ao cultivated both the immortal and martial Dao and comprehended 6 supreme divine powers. His combat strength was heaven-defying. Of the 6 emperors of a mortal martial sect, only the Crimson Emperor and the Peak Emperor had comprehended 5 supreme divine powers. Of the other 4, 1 had comprehended 4 supreme divine powers, 2 had comprehended 3 and 1 had only comprehended 2. The difference in combat strength between Luo Ao and the group of 4 was immense and only the Crimson Emperor and the Peak Emperor could barely fight Luo Ao. The remaining 4 emperors could not withstand Luo Ao's attack at all. Poof! In less than 8 breaths, the emperor who comprehended 2 supreme divine powers was killed on the spot by Luo Ao. After a while, another emperor of a mortal martial sect died. As for Luo Ao, he strolled leisurely among the remaining 4 emperors of a mortal martial sect with ease. Ah! A god's kingdom condensed in Luo Ao's palm and captured an emperor within. Golden light streaked through the god's kingdom and in the blink of an eye, an emperor was refined and died. The god's kingdom was a supreme divine power of the god race. The difference was too great. Right now, Luo Ao possessed half of the bloodline of the god race and cultivated both the immortal and martial Dao. He had comprehended 6 supreme divine powers and his combat strength was comparable to a supreme expert like the human emperor. Even with the encirclement of 6 emperors, he killed 3 of them in succession. Crimson Emperor, Peak Emperor, I'll give the 2 of you another chance. As Luo Ao fought against the 3 of them, he said, "If you submit to me now, I can let bygones be bygones." Luo Ao lacked some helpers if he wanted to rule over Tianhuang Mainland in the future. The Crimson Emperor and the Peak Emperor had comprehended 5 supreme divine powers. Luo Ao could not bear to kill them and wanted to have the 2 of them under his wings. Luo Ao, the two of us have already made up our minds today. You don't have to persuade us anymore. The Crimson Emperor said, you cultivated the martial Tao. We hope that you can repent and defend against the god race with the masses of Tianhuang Mainland. Foo-foo. As Luo Ao sneered, he waved his palm and killed another person. Of the 6 emperors of immortal martial sect, only the Crimson Emperor and Peak Emperor were left. Let me ask you again, submit or die. Luo Ao's expression darkened as he said slowly, don't blame me for not giving you guys a chance. Right then, a voice sounded from the battlefield of the Kunlun ruins, as though it came from the clouds and was high and mighty, looking down on all living beings. To think that you guys haven't taken down Tianhuang Mainland yet. You guys are way too slow. A golden figure appeared above the Kunlun ruins and shone with a bedazzling golden light like a blazing sun. The emperors merely glanced at it and felt their eyes sting. The emperors could not even see the person's figure and appearance clearly. However, after that figure appeared in the Kunlun ruins, the entire Tianhuang Mainland trembled and swayed, letting out tragic cries. It was as though even Tianhuang Mainland could not withstand this person's aura. Oh, to think that you guys would be able to condense such a strong will. Interesting. The golden figure chuckled. God said, let there be light. Right then, at the end of the Kunlun ruins, the golden figure spoke slowly. Instantly, a golden spot of light descended from the battlefield of the emperors and suddenly blossomed. The golden light emitted a terrifying aura and released beams that were sharp like golden spears. They tore through the divine powers and secret skills of the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland with ease and pierced their bodies. Poof, poof, poof. The sound of sharp weapons tearing through flesh could be heard from the battlefield. It was a shocking sight with the blood of emperors. The emperors of Tianhuang Mainland were enveloped by the golden light and those who were weak died on the spot. Even emperors such as the Blue Dragon Emperor, Storyteller and the others who had comprehended 4 or 5 supreme divine powers were pierced by the golden light. Blood gushed out of their wounds and they fell from midair with weak auras and dispirited expressions. The golden light contained a strange power that their bloodlines and divine powers could not purge. The emperors of Tianhuang Mainland were either dead or injured, all of them were crippled by a single move from the golden figure. The Crimson Emperor and the Peak Emperor were already lying in a pool of blood. The 2 of them were unlucky and their heads were pierced by the golden light. Their essence spirits were shattered and they could no longer survive. The golden figure stepped through the void and walked over slowly. Although it seemed slow, it arrived before them in the blink of an eye. Poof! The golden figure took a step forward and all the Tianhuang Mainland cultivators within its range died, turning into blood mists. Although that step did not seem like a large area, it was difficult for any cultivator to escape. With a single step, hundreds of thousands of Tianhuang Mainland living beings turned into dust beneath the golden figure. That single step was the difference between life and death. Be it Dhamma characteristic Tao lords or mighty figure patriarchs, none of them were spared by the footsteps of the golden figure. Poof! The golden figure took a second step. Hundreds of thousands more living beings of Tianhuang Mainland fell. Poof! A third step. The living beings of Tianhuang Mainland fell one after another like weeds harvested by a scythe and no one could stand up. A large bloodied area appeared between the Tianhuang Mainland army and the God Race army. It was empty without a single figure standing. There was nobody else apart from that bedazzling and unstoppable figure in midair. The will of the martial Tao practitioners of Tianhuang Mainland was shattered by the golden figure within 3 steps as well. The blood of everyone from Tianhuang Mainland gradually turned cold. How should they defend against such an expert with such strength? Everyone was filled with despair and fear. Cough. The Cloud Dragon Emperor coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood and murmured, "Everyone come back. There's no need to continue fighting." This was a complete massacre. If this continued, all the living beings of Tianhuang Mainland would die here. Greetings, God Emperor. When the God Race beings saw the golden figure, they knelt on one knee and bowed, shouting in unison. The God Emperor descended slowly and the golden light on his body gradually retracted, revealing an incomparably handsome face. His dark blue eyes were like a pair of sapphires in the depths of the ocean, deep and mysterious. The God Emperor wore a golden crown on his head with a circle of gems on it. It shone with a mysterious glow, making the God Emperor look bedazzling and incomparably noble. "Greetings, God Emperor." Luo Ao knelt on one knee and bowed. The God Emperor nodded slightly and chuckled. "Rise, the everlasting sacred sovereign." Chapter 2058. You wanted to see me? Chapter 2058. You wanted to see me? There was still no fear in Ji Yaoshua's eyes when she faced the God Emperor. She said in a deep voice, "Back then, God Empress Nian Qi of the God race knelt down in the God-slaying valley and made a vow that she would never step foot into Tianhuang Mainland in her lifetime to complete her salvation for herself and the God race. Since you're the new emperor, why did you disregard the oath made by the God Empress Nian Qi and invade Tianhuang Mainland again?" At that point, everyone in Tianhuang Mainland broke out in cold sweat for Ji Yaoshua. At that moment, everyone was shocked by the power of the God Emperor. Let alone ordinary cultivators, even the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland did not dare to meet the God Emperor's gaze, let alone question him loudly. It was a reverence that came from the depths of their souls and bloodlines. Nobody could control it at all. Nobody knew how a void reversion like Ji Yaoshua could have such courage. This was an existence countless times more terrifying than Luo Ao. If the God Emperor were to attack, no one would be able to defend against him. Perhaps because he could not be bothered to attack a void reversion Dao being, the God Emperor merely smiled indifferently. "The oath Nian Qi made has nothing to do with me. No living being or race is worthy of having the God race kneel, let alone two corpses. It's the eternal regret of the God race that God's mainland failed to take down Tianhuang Mainland twice. The reason why I'm here today is to make up for that regret." The God Emperor looked at Ji Yaoshua with his dark blue eyes and said slowly, "Nian Qi is a weakling and only the weak will retreat. As for me, I like to crush my way through and kill anyone who resists without mercy." Although the God Emperor was smiling as he spoke, everyone could sense the shuddering killing intent behind his smile. The battlefield was silent. Nobody dared to act rashly or speak casually. Luo Ao looked at everyone from Tianhuang Mainland with a mocking expression and shook his head. "I've already said that there's no need for you guys to resist. No one or world can defend against the power controlled by the God Emperor right now. Even Monk Daming of the Martial Emperor era, Dao Lord Bloodfiend and the Martial Emperor combined won't be a match for the God Emperor, let alone the Martial Emperor alone." When he heard that, Little Fatty suddenly laughed. "Therefore the reason why you chose to submit to God's mainland is not because of the title of the Martial Emperor, but because you know that you're not a match for the God Emperor." Little Fatty sneered with a mocking expression. "You chose to submit to the God race because you're afraid." "That's nothing." The God Emperor smiled gently and patted Luo Ao on the shoulder. "It's a wise move to choose to submit to an expert. If you resist stubbornly, you'll only be a corpse beneath my feet." Luo Ao lowered his head slightly to express his obedience. "That's why I said that you'll never be worthy of the title of the Martial Emperor." Ji Yaoshua looked at Luo Ao coldly and suddenly said, "What are you talking about?" Luo Ao's expression darkened. Ji Yaoshua sneered, "No matter how strong an opponent is, the Martial Emperor will stand out and protect Tianhuang Mainland. However, you chose to submit and live an ignoble existence. Not only are you not worthy of the title of Martial Emperor, you're not even worthy of cultivating the martial Dao." Luo Ao's expression was extremely dark. Ji Yaoshua's words had struck a sore spot. Up till this point of his cultivation, his greatest goal was to surpass the Martial Emperor. However, he had never obtained the recognition of the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland. Martial Emperor. Luo Ao clenched his fists and grit his teeth. The Martial Emperor of the past had long ascended. In this generation, I'm the Martial Emperor. In the future, I will even earn the title of Eternal. Who will admit to it? Ji Yaoshua asked with a mocking expression. Admit to it? Luo Ao burst into laughter. From this day forth, I'll rule over the 10,000 races and become the only master of Tianhuang Mainland. I'll destroy all the ancient books that contain Desolate Martial. The name Desolate Martial will be a taboo in Tianhuang Mainland. I'll kill anyone who dares to mention it. Desolate Martial has long ascended. As time passes, fewer people will know about him. If 10,000 years won't do, I'll use 20,000 or even 50,000 years. I have enough patience. One day, every living being in Tianhuang Mainland will think that I was the one who created the martial Tao and that I'm the eternal martial emperor. Luo Ao had a deranged expression and was already a little fiendish. Dream on. Ji Yaoxue said coldly. Luo Ao glared at the martial emperor's badge in Ji Yaoxue's hands and said coldly, "Do you think that you can replace Desolate Martial with a lousy badge? I'll cripple that badge today." The moment he said that, Luo Ao reached out and grabbed the martial emperor's badge through the void. Caught off guard, Ji Yaoxue's palm was even sliced by the martial emperor's badge and fresh blood flowed. Luo Ao gripped the martial emperor's badge and glared at the words, "Desolate Martial." He was increasingly enraged and exerted strength in his palm, squeezing viciously. Luo Ao's palm hurt but nothing happened. Immediately after, a change happened. Suddenly, a terrifying aura burst forth from the martial emperor's badge and a figure condensed in midair. He had black hair, green robes and refined features, identical to Desolate Martial. Eternal Martial Emperor. Everyone exclaimed in high spirits. Desolate Martial's gaze was cold as he attacked and punched Luo Ao. That punch was filled with the aura of death and a tremendous might descended. Although Luo Ao had comprehended 6 supreme divine powers, at that moment, he could not move or defend at all. Whoosh! Suddenly, golden light appeared at the side and the God Emperor suddenly appeared before Luo Ao in a flash. His blood chi surged and he punched the martial emperor in midair with a grim expression. Boom! The fists collided with a loud bang. Heaven and earth rumbled. The martial emperor's figure in midair gradually dissipated. As for the God Emperor, streaks of blood appeared on his face as well. His skin exploded and he was almost ruptured by a single punch. The crown on his head shone with a milky white glow. The wounds on the God Emperor healed in the blink of an eye. "It's just a phantom formed by a will," the God Emperor said indifferently and threw the martial emperor's badge on the ground casually. Luo Ao felt a sense of trepidation. The punch earlier on almost shattered the God Emperor's body. If it landed on him, he would definitely die. "Bitch, how dare you try to destroy me?" Luo Ao snapped out of his stupor and was enraged. He glared at Ji Yaoxue menacingly and walked towards her slowly with a murderous aura. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland was shocked. Everyone could tell that Luo Ao was filled with killing intent. At that moment, the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland were severely injured by the God Emperor and no one could defend against Luo Ao's attack. Ji Yaoxue merely sneered fearlessly. She seemed to be mocking the fact that Luo Ao was almost killed by a single will phantom of the martial emperor. Luo Ao was even more furious when he saw Ji Yaoxue's smile. "What are you laughing at?" Luo Ao's expression was cold as he suddenly let out a deep laughter. Fu. I know who you are. You were once Desolate Martial's confidant. You're just a pitiful person. So what if you can't forget him? It's just your wishful thinking. Desolate Martial has long ascended and forgotten about you completely. Today is the day you die. Who can save you? Where is Desolate Martial? As he spoke, Luo Ao had already arrived before Ji Yaoxue and was prepared to attack. "You wanted to see me?" Right then, a voice sounded from behind Ji Yaoxue. It was neither loud nor soft and was calm and indifferent. Chapter 2059. Return of the Martial Emperor. Chapter 2059. Return of the Martial Emperor. That voice. Ji Yaoxue shuddered and her heart seemed to have stopped beating. Was it him? How was that possible? Ji Yaoxue could no longer hear anything else except those few words. "You wanted to see me?" That voice was so real that it seemed to be whispering in her ears. However, the more that was the case, the more Ji Yaoxue could not believe it. In fact, she did not even dare to turn back. However, her body was trembling slightly and her eyes gradually turned moist. Some of the elders of Tianhuang Mainland such as the Cloud Dragon Emperor and Little Fatty were slightly stunned as well. Although more than 2,000 years had passed, that voice sounded familiar, as though. When Luo Ao heard that, he could not help but frown with a bewildered expression. Naturally, He had not heard that voice before. However, that sentence sounded strange. You wanted to see me. Instinctively, Luo Ao recalled what he had just said. His final sentence seemed to be asking where Desolate Marshal was. Could it be? A thought flashed through Luo Ao's mind. However, he denied it right on the heels of that. Impossible. Desolate Marshal ascended to the upper world more than 2,000 years ago under the watch of the living beings of the 10,000 races. How could he appear here? There were extremely cruel heaven and earth laws between the lower and upper world. There was no way anyone from the upper world could enter the billion minor kiliocosms beneath casually. That voice could not be Desolate Marshal. Those thoughts flashed through his mind in the blink of an eye. Right then, a pitch-black hole appeared in the void behind Ji Yaoxue. It expanded gradually and a figure walked out. The moment that figure stepped foot into Tianhuang Mainland, silence ensued. Be it time or space, everything in the world seemed to have stopped at that moment. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland widened their eyes and looked at that figure in disbelief as though they were looking at a god. The Cloud Dragon Emperor, Little Fatty and the others were even more agitated with their mouths agape, as though they wanted to shout. However, everyone was so emotional that they could not say a single word. The moment Luo Ao saw that person, his face turned pale and he took a half-step back instinctively. Unknowingly, beads of sweat began to roll down his forehead. The God Emperor's dark blue eyes shifted slightly, and his expression gradually turned grim when he looked at the figure. The figure wore purple robes and his black hair fell casually behind his back. His face was handsome and his gaze was clear, looking nothing special. However, the God Emperor felt an incomparably terrifying aura from that person. It was as though a gigantic volcano could erupt at any moment within that person's body. He had never seen the eternal martial emperor before. However, judging from the expressions of everyone from Tianhuang Mainland, he could vaguely guess the identity of the intruder. The God Emperor's heart skipped a beat before calming down rapidly. Ji Yaoxue noticed the change in everyone's expressions, but she did not dare to turn back. She was afraid that everything she sees would be an illusion that would be destroyed instantly. Suddenly, Ji Yaoxue's injured and cold palm felt a sense of warmth. The person behind her came to her side and held her hand gently. You're injured, the person said softly. Ji Yaoxue felt a warmth in her palm. She lowered her head and saw that the wound on her palm had healed in the blink of an eye without any scars left. Ji Yaoxue looked up and finally caught sight of that familiar face and clear eyes, the person who had appeared in her dreams countless times. Zimo! Ji Yaoxue called softly and tears rolled down her face instantly. Actually, what Luo Ao said earlier on had indeed pierced Ji Yaoxue's heart. At that moment, she was truly devastated. She was also thinking that Luo Ao was right. She was just a pitiful person. If she died, so be it. No one would care. As though he could read Ji Yaoxue's mind, Su Zimo said softly, I never left. Ji Yaoxue's heart skipped a beat as many images flashed through her mind. All these years, every time Tao Yao visited her, he would bring many mysterious treasures. In fact, there were many treasures that did not belong to this world and were unheard of. Tao Yao would find them and give them to her, hoping that her lifespan would increase and her cultivation would advance. Suddenly, she understood that Su Zimo was the one who searched for those treasures. She also understood that there was someone in this world who cared about her. For her, that person even stayed in Tianhuang Mainland for more than 2,000 years and protected her silently without giving up on extending her lifespan. Ji Yaoxue's eyes lit up once more and she looked radiant and dazzling. Martial Emperor. The Martial Emperor is back. Greetings, Martial Emperor. The crowd of Tianhuang Mainland finally broke the silence and let out a series of shouts. The living beings of the 10,000 races were excited and the blood of the martial Dao practitioners in the world burned. Their eyes were red as they knelt down one after another and bowed towards the martial Dao prime body. When all living beings in Tianhuang Mainland were suffocated by the violent methods and terrifying power of the God Emperor and were only left with despair, the eternal martial emperor returned. The fear in the hearts of everyone in Tianhuang Mainland vanished instantly when they saw that figure. Everyone knew that Tianhuang Mainland would not be destroyed with the martial emperor around. Martial Emperor. The God Emperor murmured softly and glared at Su Zimo fixedly. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of fighting spirit. He was confident that he could kill the martial emperor even if the latter returned. In order to protect the billion minor kiliocosms, the lower world naturally had its own unique heaven and earth laws. No matter how high the martial emperor's cultivation realm was, the combat strength he could release in this minor kiliocosm could not surpass a certain limit. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed by the backlash of the heaven and earth laws. Back then, the eternal human emperor's cultivation was extraordinary. After ascending to the upper world for hundreds of thousands of years and returning to the lower world, his cultivation realm fell continuously as well. The God Emperor was confident that his combat strength had already reached the peak of the billion minor kiliocosms. Nobody in the lower world could defeat him. The God Emperor's eyes were filled with fighting spirit and provocation. However, right from the beginning, Su Zimo had not even glanced at him. It was as though in Su Zimo's eyes, he was someone dispensable and could be ignored. The God Emperor's expression was terrible. This was an immense humiliation for him. Su Zimo turned around and looked at Luo Ao, who was not far away. Under that gaze, Luo Ao felt that he could not hide all the secrets in his body. He wanted to break free from his fear of the martial emperor. He had comprehended 6 supreme divine powers and cultivated both the immortal and martial Tao. His combat strength was comparable to the human emperor, and he would definitely not be so weak. However, after Su Zimo returned, he could not say a single word. It was as though an invisible aura was pressing down on his chest, and it was incomparably difficult for him to breathe. The existence of the martial Tao prime body had far surpassed Luo Ao's understanding. Chapter 2060. A Single Thought. Chapter 2060. A Single Thought. You injured Yaoshua's hand? Su Zimo asked gently with a calm expression. Aye. Luo Ao's body trembled uncontrollably and he opened his mouth slightly, as though he wanted to explain something. Yes or no? Su Zimo looked at Luo Ao with a burning gaze and asked slowly. Every single word seemed to have a tremendous force pounding on Luo Ao's chest. Luo Ao wanted to remain silent, explain and lie. However, under Su Zimo's gaze, he had no way of explaining himself. Uncontrollably, he opened his mouth slightly and said, Yes. You can die then. Su Zimo said indifferently. The moment he said that, streams of scarlet light appeared from Luo Ao's body and burst forth. The God Emperor's heart skipped a beat. He was fully focused earlier on and was prepared to save Luo Ao at any moment. However, before he even saw Su Zimo show any signs of attacking, Luo Ao was already on the brink of death. What sort of methods were those? There were no dermic arts, spirit consciousness fluctuations, divine powers, visual techniques or sound domain secret skills. The martial emperor merely said a single sentence and such a terrifying scene appeared on Luo Ao. Ah! With a pained expression, Luo Ao let out a tragic cry and channeled his spirit consciousness wildly, releasing supreme divine powers one after another. 3 heads 6 arms. Everlasting vitality. God's kingdom. At that moment, after releasing 3 supreme divine powers, even his essence spirit could not withstand the immense burden and fine cracks appeared. However, Luo Ao could not care less. The pain on his essence spirit was far less than 1/10 of the pain in his body. Right in front of everyone, Luo Ao's body was initially filled with streaks of red light. However, after he released the 3 supreme divine powers, the red light intensified as though it was replenished. The red light had already transformed into a scarlet flame rapidly. That was a karmic flame. Karmic flames were not divine powers and were born from negative karma. However, they could burn divine powers. Back then, the martial Tao prime body comprehended the red lotus karmic fire in the Kunlun ruins and was able to smelt countless divine powers to advance his cultivation. Luo Ao was entangled by negative karma in his life. With a single thought from Su Zimo, his body would burn with endless karmic flames. Luo Ao could not react in time and the God Emperor did not notice it either. That was because Su Zimo did not conjure any dermic arts, channel his spirit consciousness or release any secret skills. He merely activated a single thought. With a single thought, the karmic flames burned him. If Luo Ao had not activated his divine powers, he might not have attracted such ferocious karmic flames. The power of divine powers could not suppress the karmic flames at all, and would only make them burn brighter. Even with the exuberant life force of everlasting vitality, it was difficult for the karmic flames to extinguish. Everlasting vitality was also a divine power. Divine powers could not defeat negative karma. Luo Ao's mouth was agape and his features were contorted with a menacing expression. The karmic flames burning on his body burned his hair, skin, flesh, bones, organs and essence chi red and transparent. Right in front of everyone, Luo Ao's body was completely engulfed by the karmic flames. Before long, the karmic flames gradually extinguished. Luo Ao's figure had already vanished, leaving only a gigantic demonic red lotus flower on the ground. The entire process sounded long, but it only took less than 10 breaths. Luo Ao was incinerated by the karmic flames and his essence spirit could not escape. His flesh and blood eventually left only a red lotus imprint on the ground. When they saw that, the people of Tianhuang Mainland finally vented their frustrations. As for the God Race camp, it was silent. Initially, they had made a comeback with a torrential aura and were prepared to crush Tianhuang Mainland in one fell swoop. The cavalry crushed over and massacred wantonly. But now that they saw such methods, every single God Race being could not help but feel uneasy and fearful. Piak, piak, piak. Suddenly, the God Emperor clapped gently and praised with a smile. What amazing methods! Many God Race beings were invigorated when they heard that. Thankfully, the God Emperor was presiding over everything at the front. Su Zimo's gaze shifted as he looked at the corpses that had yet to turn cold in the Kunlun ruins. He looked at the scarlet blood river that was still warm in the God-slaying valley, and the millions of living beings that were killed by the God Emperor in 3 steps between the two armies. In less than a day, close to 10 million living beings were buried in the Kunlun ruins forever. If he had not returned in time, even more living beings in Tianhuang Mainland would have died. A look of pain and killing intent flashed through the depths of Su Zimo's eyes. He turned slightly and looked at the God Emperor for the first time. There was no threat in that gaze. It was calm as water and clear. However, for some unknown reason, the moment that gaze looked over, the God Emperor suddenly felt his hair stand on end and his scalp prickle. He finally understood the indescribable fear and irresistible pressure that Luo Ao felt against Su Zimo. The blood debt of 10 million living beings in Tianhuang Mainland will be on you. Su Zimo glanced at the God Emperor indifferently and said, "You can die too." The moment he said that, scarlet flames surged out from the God Emperor's body as well. Ah! The God Emperor shrieked in pain with a tragic expression. He finally felt the pain of Luo Ao's death. It was as though there were a billion ants gnawing at his flesh, bones and organs. Instantly, the God Emperor fell into madness and scratched his body wildly. Everywhere his fingertip passed, blood scars appeared and divine blood surged. Although the golden divine blood possessed an incomparably mighty power, it could not extinguish the karmic flames and merely hindered them slightly. The God Emperor regained his clarity momentarily. He did not dare to use his divine powers and channeled his spirit consciousness into the golden crown above his head. Splash! 8 sparkling gems were embedded around the golden crown. At that moment, a milky white glow surged out from the gems. It was divine and flawless as it scattered from above his head and washed through the God Emperor's body like a waterfall. Buzz! Buzz! The karmic flames in the God Emperor's body let out a sound and gradually extinguished under the envelopment of the milky white light. The God Emperor escaped death and panted heavily. Although the karmic flames were extinguished, his flesh, organs and bones were still injured by them and were burned bright red. The God Emperor's skin had already split open and demonic red lotus flowers bloomed. Thankfully, he had this god's crown. Otherwise, he would have died for sure. Oh! Su Zimo raised his brow slightly. The martial Tao furnace melted all dermic divine powers and the milky white light that surged out of the god's crown was a power he had never seen before. That power could extinguish the karmic flames. The God Emperor's divine blood surged and with the help of the god's crown, his injuries healed in the blink of an eye. Fu fu fu! When the God Emperor saw that the god's crown could suppress the karmic flames, he burst into laughter. His confidence was regained as he shouted, "That's all there is to the eternal martial emperor." "Is that so?" Su Zimo had an indifferent expression as he held Ji Yaoshua's hand and walked slowly towards the God Emperor. "Be careful, don't bring me along," Ji Yaoshua said softly. She was worried about Su Zimo and wanted him to let her go and fight with all his might. "It's fine." Su Zimo smiled gently and shook his head, still holding Ji Yaoshua's hand. "He's quite capable if he can withstand a single punch of mine." Chapter 2061. One Punch 1. Chapter 2061. One Punch 1. "He's quite capable if he can withstand a single punch of mine." When she heard that, Ji Yaoshua was relieved and could not help but smile. She allowed Su Zimo to hold her hand and walk towards the God Emperor. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland was excited and their eyes were filled with endless anticipation. This was the boldness of the eternal martial emperor. A single sentence could make one's blood boil. When the God Emperor heard that, his handsome face turned dark instantly. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had never heard such arrogant words. This was no longer a provocation or contempt. This was complete disregard. As the God Emperor of God's mainland, he felt that his combat strength was extraordinary and he had already reached the peak of a minor kiliacosm. He had never suffered such humiliation. "Martial Emperor." The God Emperor channeled his blood chi slowly and said coldly, "You're way too arrogant. This is a minor kiliacosm. No matter what realm you cultivate to, there's a limit to the power you can release. Your karmic flames can no longer hurt me. I don't believe that I can't even withstand a single punch from you." The moment he said that, the blood chi in the God Emperor's body surged and rose rapidly to its peak. His body shone with an endless golden radiance like a blazing sun that burst forth with a blinding light. Splash! The divine blood surged like a tsunami. The moment the God Emperor stepped foot into Tianhuang Mainland, the golden light of his blood chi was something that even the emperors of Tianhuang Mainland could not withstand. However, at that moment, the golden light that burst forth seemed to be restricted by an invisible power and shrank continuously, only flickering slightly on the surface of the God Emperor's body. Su Zimo's blood chi rose slowly as well. It was as though a gigantic furnace was burning within his body. Before the golden light of the God Emperor's blood chi could shine over, it was burned into nothingness by Su Zimo's blood chi. The space around Su Zimo distorted. As for Ji Yaoshua, she was right beside Su Zimo. However, she did not feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, it was as though a warm ray of sunlight was shining on her and it was very comfortable. Su Zimo merely walked towards the God Emperor step by step. However, the golden blood chi in the God Emperor's body seemed to be suppressed by an incomparably powerful aura and could not break free. The sound of the tsunami in the God Emperor's body had already vanished. The circulation of his bloodlines slowed down. The God Emperor was originally a blazing sun. However, as Su Zimo approached, his blazing sun gradually shrank into a fireball. Green veins popped up on the God Emperor's forehead and neck. If he could not break free, his blood chi would be suppressed by Su Zimo even before the latter could attack. Ah! The God Emperor roared into the skies and milky white lights flowed down from the god's crown once more. The light allowed the God Emperor to obtain a temporary release. The God Emperor was invigorated and released his blood chi, causing the sound of a tsunami to echo once more. His figure floated up slowly and a gigantic phantom appeared beneath him. It was an ancient and mysterious pyramid made of gigantic rocks. It was golden all over and was natural, emitting rays of golden light with a rampant might. Beneath the pyramid, countless living beings of all races knelt. There were millions of them and there was no end in sight. Every single living being clasped their palms together and looked up at the pyramid in the skies piously, chanting prayers continuously. Golden threads extended from the heads of the living beings and eventually gathered in the pyramid. The God Emperor stood at the top of the pyramid and spread his arms. Through the pyramid beneath him, he absorbed a mysterious power from millions of living beings continuously and the golden light in his body intensified. His aura rose continuously. The energy fluctuation released by his body became increasingly terrifying. At that moment, the God Emperor wore the god's crown and stood on millions of living beings. He was like the only divine being in the world and was unparalleled. The bloodline phenomenon of the god race. How could this be? The emperors of Tianhuang Mainland seemed to have sensed something and exclaimed. Above their heads, there were golden threads as well that surged towards the pyramid beneath the god emperor's feet. The bloodline phenomenon of the god emperor turned the entire world into his god's kingdom and absorbed the power of all living beings in the world. Martial Emperor, my bloodline phenomenon is synthesized with the supreme divine power, God's kingdom. This world is my kingdom. All living beings of Tianhuang Mainland are my subjects. How are you going to fight me? The God Emperor stood on the pyramid and his voice spread in all directions. Your God's kingdom is merely a speck of dust in my furnace. How are you going to fight me? Right then, Su Zimo's voice sounded. The God Emperor's expression changed starkly. Suddenly, he realized that Su Zimo had already vanished from his god's kingdom. However, Su Zimo's voice came from all directions, as though it was outside his god's kingdom. Immediately after, be it everyone from Tianhuang Mainland or the God Race Army, they witnessed a strange and terrifying scene. The God Emperor's god's kingdom seemed to be shrinking. Outside the god's kingdom, there was a gigantic furnace that enveloped it with raging flames. The God Emperor's god's kingdom accommodated heaven and earth and absorbed the power of all living beings. However, Su Zimo's martial Dao furnace devoured the god's kingdom and wanted to burn it into ashes. The God Emperor's god's kingdom had an extremely high intent and could accommodate heaven and earth. However, Su Zimo's martial Dao furnace was superior. The temperature in the god's kingdom rose continuously. Flames burst forth from the gigantic pyramid. The God Emperor was shocked. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly appeared before him. He held Ji Yaoshua's hand with his left hand and punched towards the God Emperor with his right fist. Boom, boom, boom. Su Zimo's bloodline surged. It was not the sound of a tsunami, but more like raging tides crashing onto shore with a massive might that was shuddering. The God Emperor roared and circulated all the power in his body as well. His golden blood chi condensed into a single spot and he waved his golden fist, punching towards Su Zimo. Boom! The fists collided with a deafening bang. Instantly, the surrounding phenomenons dissipated. Su Zimo and the God Emperor returned to Tianhuang Mainland. The god's kingdom and furnace had already vanished. The two of them exchanged punches and did not move at all. The world went silent. Everyone held their breaths and awaited the final outcome. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound came from the battlefield. When it landed in everyone's ears, it was like thunder. Cracks appeared on the God Emperor's face. The cracks extended rapidly to his entire body. Right in front of everyone, the God Emperor's body exploded into a golden blood mist. The moment the golden blood mist appeared, it was refined once more and turned into ashes. Emperors could use blood rebirth. But now, the God Emperor did not even have a single drop of divine blood left. The God Race Army looked at everything in a daze and could not accept it for a moment. They had lost. The God Emperor was completely defeated. As the Martial Emperor had said, he could not even withstand a single punch from him. Chapter 2062. Lotus with every step. Chapter 2062. Lotus with every step. Ever since the God Emperor became the Emperor of God's Mainland, his combat strength had been heaven-defying and he was invincible in the lower world. Even the High Priest in the central divine city of God's Mainland, who had lived for countless years, referred to this generation's God Emperor as the strongest God Emperor in the history of the God race. But now, the God Emperor's body was shattered by a single punch from the Martial Emperor of Tianhuang Mainland, and there was not even a single drop of divine blood left. Not only did the Martial Emperor's punch strike the God Emperor heavily, it even shattered the confidence and pride of the God Race Army. Actually, the God Emperor was not wrong previously. Although the martial Dao Prime Body's cultivation realm was already comparable to an Earth Immortal of the upper world when he lingered in the lower world, he did not dare to use his full strength. If he used the power of an Earth Immortal, he could kill the God Emperor with a single gaze without even attacking. However, at the same time, he would also suffer a backlash from the heaven and earth laws. Therefore, the attack of the martial Tao prime body earlier on did not exceed the upper limit of the lower world's power or reach the level of the black immortals of the upper world. Even so, the God Emperor could not withstand a punch from the martial Tao prime body. Swoosh! Suddenly, the god's crown that floated in midair suddenly transformed into a golden streak of light and sped towards the west. Su Zimo's gaze shifted and a tremendous might descended, suppressing the god's crown. The space around the god's crown seemed to be restricted by an invisible force. Splash! The 8 gems on the god's crown shone with a milky white glow once more. The god's crown shuddered and broke free from Su Zimo's spirit consciousness pressure. Instantly, it fled thousands of kilometers into the depths of the Kunlun ruins towards the rainbow cave that connected to God's mainland. He's not dead, Su Zimo sneered. At the final moment, the God Emperor's essence spirit chose to escape into the god's crown and avoided a calamity. At that moment, the God Emperor's essence spirit escaped into the distance with the help of the god's crown. It was clear that he wanted to escape back to God's mainland. The power contained by the god's crown was rather strange. Su Zimo was slightly surprised that it could break free from his spirit consciousness pressure. Aren't you going to chase after him? Ji Yaoxue was worried when she saw the God Emperor escape. If such a strong foe was not eliminated completely, he would definitely become a huge calamity for Tianhuang mainland in the future. It's fine. Su Zimo shook his head. It's difficult for him to reconstruct his body without any divine blood. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo looked to the west and said indifferently, "Furthermore, even if he didn't escape back, I was about to go take a look at God's mainland. The blood debt of 10 million living beings in Tianhuang mainland has to be repaid with divine blood." Su Zimo was truly enraged this time round. Because of Nian Qi, he was not too guarded against the god race. To think that Tianhuang mainland would suffer such a serious injury from the invasion of the god race. More importantly, Ji Yaoxue was injured and some of his old friends from Tianhuang mainland nearly died as well. If he had returned slightly later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Back then, Nian Qi was conferred the title of emperor and came to kowtow to the divine Ho to complete her salvation. If not for Nian Qi, Su Zimo would have headed to God's mainland in the west alone and massacred everything after settling the blood fiend catastrophe more than 2,000 years ago. Turning around, Su Zimo looked at the Cloud Dragon Emperor and everyone else from Tianhuang mainland and extended his palm. An extremely rich life force condensed in his palm and divine powers surged. Everlasting vitality. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness moved and he waved his palm gently in midair, murmuring wind and rain. Phew! A gentle breeze blew and it drizzled. The wind contained a tremendous amount of life force that surged like a spring breeze. The withered vegetation that was soaked in blood on the ground regrew under the breeze. The injuries of everyone from Tianhuang mainland healed significantly as well. A jade-green drizzle fell from the skies. When the raindrops landed on everyone from Tianhuang mainland, their wounds healed at a visible speed. Even the wounds on the emperors of Tianhuang mainland that were pierced by the God Emperor's golden light were healing. The martial Tao prime body fused 2 supreme divine powers, everlasting vitality and wind and rain, allowing them to heal the living beings of the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland. Such methods could be considered as a miracle. Su Zimo looked at everyone from Tianhuang mainland and asked, "Do you want to follow me to the west to take a look?" When they heard that, the living beings of the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland were in an uproar. In other words, the martial emperor wanted to lead them to the west and God's mainland. Of course. Little Fatty burst into laughter and was the first to stand out. Even at my age, I've yet to see how God's mainland looks like. Let's go to God's mainland and kill them all. Everyone from Tianhuang mainland shouted. Puny race, how dare you invade the territory of the God race? You will definitely be judged by God. A commander of the God race army stood out and shouted. Another black-robed God race being said coldly, "No outsiders can leave God's mainland alive." Martial Emperor, I advise you to think about it carefully. A God race commander said in a deep voice, "If you bring people into God's mainland now, it'll be equivalent to declaring war on the God race." You have to think carefully. Declaring war on the god race will be a catastrophe for you and Tianhuang Mainland. The Blue Dragon Emperor cursed angrily. So what if we declare war? The god race was the one who declared war on Tianhuang Mainland first. Turning around slowly, Su Zimo looked at the vast god race army opposite him and said indifferently, I'm not too sure about what you said. However, I know one thing. I'm a catastrophe for you guys. Before his sentence was finished, Su Zimo held Ji Yaoshua's hand and soared into the air, heading west without even looking at the god race army beneath them. The god race army was slightly stunned. The martial emperor of Tianhuang Mainland had let them off just like that. Right then in midair, Su Zimo took a step forward and a gigantic green lotus flower appeared beneath his feet. The green lotus flower emanated rays of resplendent light that were divine and flawless. The god race beings that were enveloped by the green lotus flower exploded one after another, turning into blood mists that were washed away by the green light released by the green lotus flower. Even the emperors of the god race were not spared and died on the spot. Su Zimo took a second step and another gigantic green lotus flower appeared beneath his feet. Large patches of the god race were purged by the green lotus flower. With every step Su Zimo took, a green lotus flower would appear beneath his feet. Heavenly Flower Fall and Earth Gushing Golden Lotus. Those were two greater divine powers of the Buddhist monasteries and were extremely powerful. If those two greater divine powers could be comprehended to an extreme, they could develop a supreme divine power of the Buddhist monasteries. Lotus with every step. A pure land would be created with every single step. All foreign living beings in that step would be purified by the green lotus and turn into a pure land of the Buddhist monasteries without exception. By the time Su Zimo led Ji Yaoshua into the depths of the Kunlun ruins and approached the Rainbow Cave, the god race army behind him had already been cleansed by the green lotuses and turned into dust that was buried in the Kunlun ruins forever. Chapter 2063 Eastern Purple Chi. Chapter 2063 Eastern Purple Chi. Su Zimo and Ji Yaoshua led everyone from Tianhuang Mainland into the Rainbow Cave and experienced a mysterious feeling. The sensation of time alternated between arduous and swift. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland felt their eyes light up. They had already left Tianhuang Mainland and entered another world. An unfamiliar, ancient, solemn and dignified aura surged over God's mainland. Outsiders. Right then, a shout sounded from ahead. There were many god race beings guarding the spatial node of God's mainland as well. When they saw Su Zimo and the other Tianhuang Mainland cultivators enter God's mainland, they were shocked. All the god race beings knew that the god emperor was leading the god race army this time round to flatten Tianhuang Mainland and rule over it with the faith of the god race. However, not long ago, a golden light flew out from this spatial node and fled towards the central divine city. Most of the god race beings did not manage to see what it was. An emperor of the god race guarding the borders could vaguely recognize that it was the supreme divine weapon of the god race, the god's crown. The god's crown came from the upper world and was even more noble than the four divine judgment weapons of the god race. Only the god emperor was qualified to wear and control it. The god race emperor at the borders sensed that something was amiss. Unless something major happened, the god emperor would carry the god's crown with him at all times. Could something huge have happened? The god race emperor denied that speculation thereafter. Before the god emperor set off this time round, the high priest of the god race expended his essence blood and released the god race's secret skill, the great divination technique, to divine fortune. The outcome of the great divination technique was auspicious. The god emperor would sweep through Tianhuang Mainland and no living being or obstacle could stop the god race's conquest. This god race emperor was not the only one. All the god race beings had no doubts about the high priest's prophecy. The god emperor ruled over God's mainland and was supreme and peerless. As for the high priest, his status was extremely unique and extraordinary. He was the wise man of the god race and even the god emperor had to be respectful to him. That was because the god race's high priest controlled the most mysterious secret skill of the god race, the great divination technique. In the primordial era, the god race invaded Tianhuang Mainland. Due to the god emperor's pride and confidence back then, he did not invite the high priest out of seclusion and took matters into his own hands. In the end, he returned in a crushing defeat. There would definitely be no mistake in the outcome of the great divination technique. That was the consensus of the god race. At that thought, the god race emperor did not react. It was only when he saw Su Zimo and the others from Tianhuang Mainland appear before him that he realized something big had happened. Outsiders. The god race emperor rose slowly into the air and arrived opposite Su Zimo. With a cold expression, he said slowly, "Scram. Lowlifes like you are not allowed to step foot on God's mainland. Outsiders are here. Kill them." Many god race beings at the borders of God's mainland noticed everyone from Tianhuang Mainland and charged over with murderous auras. The deep-rooted pride in the blood of the god race caused their first reaction when they saw everyone from Tianhuang Mainland to be disdainful. Su Zimo had an indifferent expression and did not even look at the god race emperor opposite him. He merely stood shoulder to shoulder with Ji Yaoxue and walked through the air. He extended his palm and gripped gently in the direction of the god race emperor through the distant void. Boom! Boom! The space around the god race emperor collapsed instantly. Right in front of everyone, the god race emperor was crushed by a sudden terrifying power and turned into a blood mist, his essence spirit destroyed. The god race beings at the border had just gathered and saw this before they could charge over. Many god race beings exclaimed in shock. An emperor of the god race died just like that. He could not even defend against a single attack from the other party. Who are you guys? An ancestor god tried his best to suppress the fear in his heart and questioned Su Zimo and the others loudly. "I'm Desolate Marshal and I'm here to collect a blood debt from the god race," Su Zimo said and flicked his finger at the same time. "TSK! TSK! TSK!" One after another, white sword chi burst forth from his fingertips and swarmed towards the god race army. Heaven-slaying sword chi, 108,000 swords. In the hands of the martial Dao Prime Body, there were more than 108,000 heaven-slaying sword chi. It was endless. The killing intent shook the heavens and the stars were shifted out of alignment. Even the emperors of the god race could not defend against Su Zimo's attack. Against the heaven-slaying sword chi released by Su Zimo, the remaining god race army was even more fragile and their lives were worthless. Divine blood, phenomenons, divine weapons and divine powers. None of their trump cards could defend against a single heaven-slaying sword chi. The martial Dao Prime Body's understanding of the heaven-slaying sword chi far surpassed 2,000 years ago and its might was naturally terrifying. Even a few ancestor gods at the borders of God's mainland had their glabella pierced by a sword chi and died. Initially, everyone from Tianhuang Mainland wanted to attack and fight the army of God's mainland. However, before long, they realized that they did not even have to move. All they had to do was follow behind the martial emperor. Su Zimo barged right in without any pauses. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland followed closely and looked around. God's mainland had its own unique civilization. The buildings, mountains, rivers and even trees on this land were extremely different from Tianhuang Mainland. There were a billion minor kiliocosms and every single minor kiliocosm nurtured different civilizations and living beings. Along the way, experts of the god race stood out from time to time, wanting to block the path of everyone from Tianhuang Mainland. However, they were killed by Su Zimo casually. Su Zimo wanted to lead everyone from Tianhuang Mainland west and kill their way into the central divine city. He wanted to kill the god emperor right in front of the god race. He wanted to use the blood of the god race to brand an indestructible mark on this land and race. The name of that mark would be called fear. At the same time, in the central divine city. This divine city had been through countless years and stood upright. The city walls shone with a golden metallic luster, sacred and flawless with defined edges. This divine city was the center of God's mainland. At that moment, a golden light flew into the divine city and barged into the palace where the god emperor cultivated. No one could stop it. Hurry and call the high priest out of seclusion to take over the situation. I need time to condense my body once more. The moment many god race guards charged over, they heard the god emperor's extremely weak voice. With that said, the god emperor's voice vanished. Many god race guards exchanged puzzled glances. In their hearts, the god emperor was supreme and invincible. Who could shatter the god emperor's body? What happened? I'll inform the high priest. Right then, a god race guard said and was about to run in the direction of the sacrificial platform. The moment he turned around, he saw a white-haired red-robed old man wielding a white staff standing not far away, looking towards the east. The red-robed old man was the god race's high priest. Nobody knew when the high priest appeared. How is that possible? The wrinkles on the high priest's face seemed to have deepened as he murmured repeatedly, "My great divination technique was clearly not wrong." "High priest, what happened?" The god emperor seemed to have. A god race guard hesitated. The high priest had a grim expression as he said slowly, "Purple chi is streaming over from the east, the god race is in for a calamity." Chapter 2064. I'm the God. Chapter 2064. I'm the God. Su Zimo led everyone from Tianhuang Mainland west. Before long, they saw the first ancient city ahead. Many god race riders and mages had long formed a formation in front of the ancient city. The mages were at the front and the priests were at the back. Although there were only a few thousand of them, the weakest among them was also at the conjoint body realm. In the crowd, there was even a mage who was an emperor. "Barbarians of the East, stop in your tracks." The god race rider in the lead wielded his sword and shouted at Su Zimo and the others. "Outsiders from Tianhuang Mainland, since you've stepped foot into the territory of the god race, let the light of the god race cleanse your filthy souls and send them to hell." The mage emperor at the back waved his staff and chanted in ancient language. A powerful energy fluctuation spread out in midair. A blinding light spread out from the top of the mage emperor's staff and entered the heads of everyone from Tianhuang Mainland, scattering a large rain of light. Every single drop of the rain could kill low-level emperors. Kill! The many god race riders at the front roared as well and charged towards everyone from Tianhuang Mainland. Humph! Su Zimo harumphed coldly. The moment that voice sounded, the mage emperor's actions paused in midair. His eyes widened in fear. Blood scars appeared on his face. The mage emperor's body was relatively weak and the reason why he stood at the back was to avoid a fatal blow to his body. However, he had not expected that his body could not even withstand a single harumph from Su Zimo. The golden armor of the god race riders at the front exploded as well. How dare the light of a firefly try to compete against the shine of the moon for glory? Su Zimo hollered and extended his palm. It was as though he was holding a ball of purple light in his palm. Su Zimo gripped his palm tightly. Buzz! The ball of light exploded and countless purple lights burst forth from the gaps between his fingers, spreading in all directions. The rain of light in midair evaporated instantly after being swept by the purple lights. Before the god race riders at the front could arrive, they were swept by a large purple light and fell from midair. Before they landed on the ground, the god race riders were already corpses. The mage emperor stood alone in midair without the protection of any god race riders. Su Zimo did not even look at him and continued forward with everyone from Tianhuang Mainland. The sound domain secret skill he released earlier on was enough to shatter that emperor's essence spirit. Bang! The mage emperor's body shattered and his essence spirit was filled with cracks. It was dim and dissipated slowly. Many god race beings stood on the city walls of the ancient city. Most of the god race beings were weak and had yet to cultivate to the conjoint body realm. However, there was no fear in the way the god race beings looked at Su Zimo. Instead, they were filled with provocation. The sort of confidence and pride was already deep in their bones. Outsiders, do you know what you're doing? Ignorant barbarians, you're killing gods. Anyone who kills a god in God's mainland will definitely receive the judgment of God and receive divine punishment. Suddenly, shouts sounded from the ancient city. Anyone who kills a god will definitely receive the judgment of God and receive divine punishment. Tens of millions of god race beings gathered in the massive ancient city and let out a series of shouts that shook the 9 heavens with a majestic aura. Ha 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 ha! Suddenly, Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. His laughter reverberated through the world and drowned out the shouts of tens of millions of god race beings. Instantly, it was as though Su Zimo's laughter was the only thing left in the world. Crack, crack, Crack. Massive cracks appeared on the city walls of the ancient city. Even the indestructible city walls that had been through time could not withstand Su Zimo's wild laughter. God's judgment and divine punishment. Su Zimo retracted his smile and looked at the many god race beings in the ancient city opposite him, saying slowly, "Here, I'm the god." The moment he said that, the ancient city collapsed as though it could not withstand such a terrifying aura. Countless god race beings were buried in the dust and let out tragic cries. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness moved and swept across the ruins of the ancient city, capturing the conjoint body mighty figures and ancestor gods hidden in the ancient city. With a single thought, the god race mighty figures and ancestor gods died on the spot. Su Zimo led everyone from Tianhuang Mainland and continued west. Central Divine City. Many experts of the god race gathered beside the high priest and everyone looked up at the east. At that moment, not only the high priest, everyone in the divine city could clearly see the terrifying scene in the east. A purple chi was approaching slowly from the east. It was getting richer and even dyed the skies in the east. Although they were far away, every god race being in the central divine city could sense an unstoppable pressure. "High priest," an emperor of the god race said in a deep voice, "let's head out of the city and fight. The Light Rider army will definitely be able to kill these outsiders." "No. Splitting our strength now is equivalent to courting death." The high priest shook his head. "Everyone, listen to my orders. Gather in the central city and await the final battle." After a brief pause he asked again, "Did anyone inform the temple?" "I've already informed them and they'll be here soon." Behind the high priest was a little girl in red robes. She was not old and was around 13 years old as she said softly, "All right." The high priest was slightly relieved. "Once the God Emperor's body is reconstructed, together with me and the Temple Rider, the three of us will join forces and gather the strength of the city to fight this expert of Tianhuang Mainland." "Grandpa High Priest, do you think that this expert from Tianhuang Mainland is the martial emperor that Sister Nianqi mentioned?" the girl suddenly asked. "Martial Emperor." The high priest's expression adrift as the words Nianqi said to him before she ascended flashed through his mind. They must never ever try to invade Tianhuang Mainland again. Within, there was an expert that God's mainland could not withstand. In truth, back when Nianqi returned from Tianhuang Mainland and was eventually conferred the title of Empress, apart from her talent, there was also the push of the high priest. That was because in his great divination technique, it was predicted that there would be a calamity for the god race. The only way to resolve the calamity was through Nianqi. Therefore, with his help, Nianqi was able to go against everyone's objections and become the god empress. The high priest did not stop Nianqi from joining forces with Tianhuang Mainland to complete her salvation. Later on, the news from Tianhuang Mainland confirmed the accuracy of the great divination technique and his judgment. A woman appeared on Tianhuang Mainland's side and killed experts of the upper world consecutively. In the end, she even perfected the heaven and earth laws of Tianhuang Mainland before ascending. When that woman appeared, even the god race beings in the most ancient and secretive place of God's mainland were scared out of their wits and did not dare to breathe. Could it be the martial emperor? The girl asked again, as though she had something on her mind. The past flashed through the high priest's mind and he gradually snapped out of his stupor. When he heard the girl's question, he shook his head. "I don't know either." He did not know who the current expert of Tianhuang Mainland was. However, he only knew one thing. His great divination technique did not notice that there was such a terrifying expert in Tianhuang Mainland, nor did he predict today's events. The secret skill of the god race that had been passed down for a long time was useless against this person. Chapter 2065. Advancing Alone. Chapter 2065. Advancing Alone. Boom, boom. Another ancient divine city was destroyed by Su Zimo. Purple clouds filled the skies as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Streaks of purple power of thunder descended and turned the emperors and ancestor gods of the divine city into ashes. This was no ordinary power of thunder. The purple lightning contained the comprehension of the martial Tao prime body towards tribulation. Under the envelopment of the purple heavenly tribulation, the divine city was reduced to ruins. This was already the 10th divine city that Su Zimo had crushed. Flames, floods, earth ruptures, skies collapsing, ice. Terrifying calamities descended on God's mainland. Those powerful divine powers were at the fingertips of the martial Dao prime body. Even the most ordinary dermic art would be devastating for the god race if it was released by him. Su Zimo led everyone from Tianhuang mainland west and killed any god race being that dared to stop him with a flick of his finger. Right from the beginning, everyone from Tianhuang mainland that followed him did not attack. Everyone from Tianhuang mainland was now used to this scene. From their initial resistance, retaliation and prideful contempt, the god race beings were now only left with panic and fear as they fled in all directions. In the face of absolute power, the god race beings were in a sorry state and were no different from other living beings. The noble pride of the god race was crushed by Su Zimo. "I don't believe it." A god race being with disheveled hair broke free from the dust and soared into the air, shouting at Su Zimo, "You're just a puny human with a weak bloodline. How can you compare to the god race?" In fact, Su Zimo did not even attack and merely glanced at that person indifferently. The bloodline of the god race being evaporated into nothingness. Who opened the gates of hell and unleashed these fiends of the east? Everyone, flee for your lives. Darkness has already descended. Some of the god race beings fell into the dust in a daze. Su Zimo led everyone from Tianhuang mainland forward and ignored the god race beings. He maintained some restraint in his attacks unless some god race beings had death wishes and wanted to challenge him. Otherwise, he would only kill the ancestor gods and emperors in every divine city he passed. Su Zimo wanted to kill all the ancestor gods and emperors of God's mainland. The hell fiends are headed west. Everyone, head to the central divine city. The high priest and our god emperor are gathering an army there, prepared to fight these fiends to the death. The high priest has sent an oracle. Everyone, hurry and seek refuge in the central divine city. The high priest and god emperor are in the central divine city and are prepared to kill this fiend emperor from Tianhuang mainland to purge away the darkness. One after another, news spread through the entire God's mainland. More and more god race beings fled and abandoned the cities. In the end, Su Zimo led everyone from Tianhuang mainland and charged straight into God's mainland without any resistance. They headed west and got closer and closer to the central divine city. Martial Emperor, God's mainland has waged war everywhere and has a strong foundation. After pondering for a long time, the storyteller stood out and analyzed calmly. Now that we're deep in the hinterland, it'll be troublesome if the god race and god emperor gather all the power of God's mainland together. Our arrival this time round is a little sudden and we didn't prepare well. If we start a battle rashly, Tianhuang mainland will suffer immense losses as well. Su Zimo shook his head. There's no need for you guys to attack. Just watch from the side. This. The storyteller winced and gasped. In other words, the martial emperor meant that he wanted to fight against the entire God's mainland and suppress a world single-handedly. Everyone from Tianhuang mainland advanced. Finally, everyone caught sight of an unimaginably majestic ancient city. Or rather, it could no longer be considered as a city. The ancient city walls stood tall and extended along the horizon on both sides without any end. It stood horizontally in front of them, as though it was cutting a continent into two. A dense crowd of god race beings stood on the city walls. Some of the god race beings wielded spears, swords, longbows and staffs. Every single god race being surged with golden blood chi and shone with a resplendent glow. Their battle intent surged as they glared at everyone from Tianhuang mainland murderously. Almost all the top experts of God's mainland were gathered here, prepared to kill everyone from Tianhuang mainland. The number of god race beings accommodated in the central divine city had already reached billions. In fact, god race beings from all directions were still gathering towards the central divine city. Kill! 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 Many god race beings in the central divine city shouted. One could imagine the ardor and zeal coursing through their blood when billions of god race beings gathered and roared into the skies. What sort of an aura was that? The entire world was trembling. On the side of Tianhuang mainland, even the storyteller, Cloud Dragon Emperor and the other emperors of Tianhuang mainland were shocked, let alone ordinary cultivators. The god race was innately strong. If the billions of god race beings swarmed forward together with the ancestor god and emperors, even they would be drowned instantly. Indeed, the fact that God's mainland could conquer other minor kiliacosms continuously meant that they had a foundation that other worlds could not match. Back in Tianhuang mainland, there were only tens of thousands of god race beings, but they had already become one of the primordial 9 races and the most terrifying faction in Tianhuang mainland. Now that billions of god race beings were gathered in the central divine city, it was an unimaginably terrifying scene. Although everyone from Tianhuang mainland had absolute confidence in the martial emperor, they were shaken at that moment. The difference in their formations was way too great. On the side of Tianhuang mainland, everyone headed west in an aggressive manner like an unstoppable torrent. However, when they arrived at the central divine city, they bumped into an endless golden ocean. The golden ocean was already enraged and created raging tides that could surge over at any moment and drown them. Everyone from Tianhuang mainland had pale expressions. Against the terrifying formation of the central divine city, many people were already terrified and did not dare to advance. "You guys can stand here." Su Zimo glanced sideways and said to everyone from Tianhuang mainland behind him. "Martial Emperor, we'll accompany you." The storyteller, Cloud Dragon Emperor and the others said hurriedly. "There's no need." Su Zimo shook his head. "You guys can't help me. Just watch from here." With that said, Su Zimo walked through the air in the direction of the divine city alone with an indifferent expression. Even against the massive formation of the god race, Su Zimo's eyes were calm as he advanced slowly. The billions of god race beings formed an invisible aura that could crush everything. However, when the aura surged over and landed on Su Zimo, it vanished silently and did not even manage to wrinkle his purple robes. As Su Zimo approached, his aura rose rapidly instead. His black hair fluttered without any wind and his eyes seemed to be burning with flames. Su Zimo's footsteps were neither fast nor slow. However, every single step he took would cause a huge shock in the air. Spiderweb-like cracks appeared in the void beneath his feet. The skies changed and the ground shook. Chapter 2066. 3 Great Experts. Chapter 2066. 3 Great Experts. As Su Zimo approached, his aura rose as well. In the end, it reached the point where it could fight against the billions of god race beings. Although the god race beings shouted with killing intent, Su Zimo could already sense a hint of fear in the depths of their eyes. They were afraid. For countless years, the god race hunted everywhere and trampled countless living beings beneath their feet. They had never taken the human race seriously either. But now, the human before them was at an unimaginable level. Right then, a figure appeared on the city wall of the divine city. He wore a wide red dermic robe and wielded a white staff. His beard was white and his face was filled with wrinkles. The old man's eyes were deep. Even though he was in his twilight years, his dark blue eyes were still clear and shone with wisdom. "Martial Emperor," the old man said slowly, "I'm the high priest of the god race. I hope that you can take the big picture into account and retreat to your own world with everyone from Tianhuang mainland to avoid this catastrophe-level war. The god race has offended Tianhuang mainland time and again. I'm here this time round to collect a debt," Su Zimo said. "What happened back then has long become a thing of the past," the high priest said. "More than 2,000 years ago, the god empress of our race, Nian Qi, knelt in the god-slaying valley and prostrated to the divine house corpses to complete her salvation." Su Zimo said indifferently, "I can let bygones be bygones." However, this time round, the god race invaded Tianhuang mainland once more and nearly 10 million living beings died. How do you guys intend to pay for this blood debt? Martial Emperor, you traveled west and destroyed many ancient cities of God's mainland. The god race blood in your hands is probably in the tens of millions. Both parties have long paid for this blood debt," the high priest said in a deep voice. "It's not enough." Su Zimo shook his head gently. "What do you want?" the high priest asked. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he said slowly, "I'm going to make the god race pay 10 times over for this blood debt." "How dare you!" Right then, a furious roar sounded from the divine city. Roar! Immediately after, A howl that resembled a dragon's roar sounded in a dignified and furious manner. A gigantic demon beast rose slowly from the central divine city. Although it had a dragon's head, its body was like a lizard with wings on its back. It spat out flames from its mouth and let out a series of threatening growls at Su Zimo with a ferocious gaze. On the back of the demon beast stood a man with a gigantic spear. He wore golden armor and had a terrifying aura. Heavens, it's the temple's dragon rider. Our dragon rider has appeared. The martial emperor has to die. Cheers broke out from the divine city. Many god race beings were invigorated when they saw the man. In the legends of the god race, the strongest god race riders were the dragon riders. Only those that subdued the divine dragons of the god race were qualified to be dragon riders. As for the divine dragons of the god race, almost all of them were buried in the god-slaying valley in the primordial war and died in the hands of two divine house. Ever since then, the divine dragons of the god race had gone extinct on God's mainland. Many god race beings had not expected that there would be a legendary dragon rider presiding over the fort in the divine city. Martial Emperor. The gaze of the high priest turned even deeper as he said slowly, I advise you to retreat as soon as possible. The foundation of the god race is definitely not something you can imagine. The high priest's words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Cut the crap with the outsider. The dragon rider said coldly, outsiders that dare to step foot on the territory of the god race will definitely suffer divine punishment. Boom! Right then, another loud bang sounded from the center of the divine city. Martial Emperor, today is the day you die. A dignified voice sounded. Thereafter, a golden figure wearing the god's crown rose slowly and descended on the city wall. This was the god emperor who had escaped death from Tianhuang Mainland. The god emperor held a gigantic sword in his right hand that was filled with pitch-black patterns. In his left hand, he held a pitch-black shield that surged with ink-like fog. The god emperor was wielding the sword of misfortune and shield of calamity of the four divine weapons. Su Zimo was slightly surprised. He had already refined the god emperor's divine blood. To think that the god emperor could condense another body in just a few days. There was a high chance that it was because of the god's crown. The god emperor is invincible. Peerless and supreme. Many god race beings shouted once more when they saw the god emperor appear. Now that the god emperor, dragon rider and high priest were gathered, the aura of the god race was at its peak. Su Zimo's expression was calm. It had to be said that the power cultivated by the three god race beings had almost reached the limits of the lower world. Even the green lotus true body of the past might not have been confident of winning against the three of them. Unfortunately, they were facing the martial Dao prime body. This was a variable in the Trichilia cosm. The martial Dao prime body was beyond the 3 realms and 5 elements. Even the god race's great divination technique could not detect him. Martial Emperor, no matter how strong you are, there's a limit to your strength in the lower world. The god emperor shouted, I've already understood your strength. You can defeat me alone, but you can't defeat the 3 of us or the billion-strong army of the god race. All god race beings, heed my orders. Right then, the god emperor raised the sword of misfortune in his hands and paused for a moment. He pointed at Su Zimo and roared, Kill! Kill! With that order, a loud roar burst forth from the divine city. Billions of god race beings swarmed out like a golden tsunami and charged toward Su Zimo, causing the world to tremble. That power was not limited to a single person. Even a world might not be able to defend against it. Roar! At the same time, the dragon rider rode on his divine dragon and charged towards Su Zimo with one of the 4 divine weapons, the Spear of Judgment. In the blink of an eye, the dragon rider had already arrived before Su Zimo. A distance of more than 10 feet was covered instantly. On the other side, the god emperor with the god's crown on his head and the 2 divine weapons, the sword of misfortune and shield of calamity, had already appeared on the other side of Su Zimo. Above the city wall, the figure of the high priest rose slowly into the air and waved the staff of dawn, one of the 4 divine weapons. He looked up at the firmament slightly with a pious expression and chanted. Endless light spilled from the staff of dawn. The 3 peak experts of the god race attacked at the same time. Behind the 3 god race experts was an army of billions that swarmed over with a mighty might. Actually, the god emperor was not wrong. If the power wielded by Su Zimo was only at the level he displayed when he punched the God Emperor in Tianhuang Mainland, it would be difficult for him to defend against the current situation indeed. However, in reality, that punch had not reached the peak of the power that the martial Dao Prime Body could use in the lower world. You guys truly know nothing about my strength. Su Zimo sighed gently. Chapter 2067, 2067 Arrival of the Fate Rings. 2067 Arrival of the Fate Rings. God's Restraint. As the God Race High Priest chanted, the Staff of Dawn waved and shone with divine lights. Suddenly, golden ropes appeared out of thin air around Su Zimo's body, not giving him any time to dodge. Although the High Priest was the furthest away from Su Zimo and was casting his skill from the city wall, his attack descended right away. The shimmering golden ropes tightened continuously, as though they wanted to snap Su Zimo's body. What was even more frightening was that Su Zimo's bloodline could not be activated against the golden light of the ropes, as though it was suppressed by a mysterious power. God's restraint did not only restrict the cultivator's body, but also their bloodline and essence spirit. Su Zimo's expression was calm and his eyes were emotionless. Suddenly, a purple halo appeared behind Su Zimo. A loud bang sounded from his body as well, as though he had broken free from some shackles and opened a door to a mystic realm. His aura surged. A fate ring appeared. Pang, pang, pang. The golden ropes that bound him were snapped by the purple light instantly, turning into nothingness and dissipating into the world. Right then, the second secret skill of the High Priest descended. God's Judgment. Suddenly, a gigantic golden sword appeared above Su Zimo's head and slashed down at his neck. Buzz! A second purple halo appeared behind Su Zimo. Boom! The golden sword struck the purple halo with a loud bang. The golden sword dissipated. Su Zimo did not budge at all. Divine Punishment. Before the High Priest's third secret skill was formed, another purple halo appeared behind Su Zimo. The third fate ring descended. Although they were thousands of feet apart, the High Priest still shuddered and his body swayed. Blood oozed from the corner of his mouth and he looked even older, as though he was at the end of his road. He had already given it his all by releasing 3 God Race secret skills in succession without holding back. Even so, his 3 secret skills were dispelled one after another. Before the final secret skill could be formed, it was destroyed by the fate ring of the martial Dao Prime Body. The High Priest's essence, spirit and body suffered a strong backlash. No matter the outcome of the God Race for this battle, he could no longer hold out. What exactly is that? In the eyes of the High Priest, under the illumination of the 3 purple halos, Su Zimo seemed to have become the only true god in the world, looking down on the world and all living beings. Even a race as noble as the God Race had to bow down. Although the martial Dao Prime Body had long cultivated to the 6th level of the Fate Ring realm, he was wary of the backlash of the heaven and earth laws and could not release it with all his might. As for the 3 Fate Rings, they were the peak of the power of the lower world. Back when the martial Dao Prime Body fought against Dao Lord Bloodfiend, he released 3 Fate Rings and fought. In Tianhuang Mainland, although Su Zimo destroyed the God Emperor with a single punch, he had actually held back and did not use the power of his Fate Rings. The Fate Rings were the Rings of Life. Although the 3 Rings of Life looked ordinary, they contained all the Dao and Dermic arts that the martial Dao Prime Body had synthesized since he started cultivating. The martial Dao Prime Body was only truly at the peak of his power when his Fate Rings were released. With the descent of the 3 Fate Rings, Su Zimo's strength increased exponentially. The 3 secret skills of the High Priest descended and the 3 Fate Rings of the martial Dao Prime Body condensed to dispel it. Although it sounded slow, everything happened in an instant. Bloodline Phenomenon. Divine Blood Hoop. Heavenly God Descent. Adjudication Strike. The God Emperor and Dragon Rider charged in front of Su Zimo without holding back and released their bloodline phenomenons and innate divine powers, releasing the most ferocious killing power. Battle. Su Zimo hollered and carried 3 Fate Rings. Against the ferocious attacks of the God Emperor and Dragon Rider, he did not dodge or avoid. Instead, he counterattacked and Dermic Dao interweaved beneath his feet, forming the image of a turtle and snake coiling together. The turtle and snake coiled around one another and roared into the skies. Boom! When the ferocious attacks of the God Emperor and Dragon Rider collided with the turtle and snake, the latter blocked everything. The God Emperor wielded the Sword of Misfortune and circulated his blood chi, slashing forward. The Dragon Rider gripped the Spear of Judgment with both hands and thrust with a sharp expression. The evil dragon beneath the Dragon Rider roared as well and spat out pitch-black flames, biting towards Su Zimo's legs. Su Zimo's gaze was burning as he glared at the God Emperor in front of him. His blood chi surged and he punched. The martial Dao Prime body did not have any weapons. His fist and body were his weapons. That punch was indestructible and could destroy everything. With that punch, the air around the God Emperor seemed to have burned up and the divine blood in his body surged uncontrollably and began to evaporate. At that moment, the God Emperor felt as though his body was about to explode. The God Emperor had never felt such a terrifying punch. It was even more terrifying and despairing than the punch he experienced in Tianhuang Mainland. Initially, he thought that he would definitely be able to deal with Su Zimo with the help of the divine weapons. But now, in the face of such a terrifying punch, the God Emperor actually had an illusion that the Sword of Misfortune in his hands was like paper. The God Emperor wanted to roar and retaliate with all his might. However, he realized that he could only open his mouth and could not even make a sound. Su Zimo's punch was as violent as fire, as though it could incinerate everything. The moment the God Emperor opened his mouth, his throat seemed like it could spew fire. The God Emperor bit his tongue gently and spat out a stream of golden essence blood onto the Sword of Misfortune. Xing! Black fiend chi surged from the sword. The God Emperor raised the Sword of Misfortune and slashed down viciously at Su Zimo's fist. Boom! The fist and sword collided. The God Emperor shuddered. He felt as though his sword had struck metal instead of flesh. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, a jarring crack sounded from the Sword of Misfortune. The God Emperor looked at the cracks that were gradually spreading on the sword and his pupils constricted. One of the 4 divine judgment weapons of God's mainland was shattered by a single punch from the eternal martial emperor of Tianhuang mainland. Suddenly, the God Emperor's expression changed starkly. The Sword of Misfortune shattered and he felt a violent and scorching power surge over, almost engulfing him. The God Emperor hurriedly threw away the Sword of Misfortune that was filled with cracks and retreated. Even so, he was a half-step too late. Bang! The God Emperor's body could not withstand the impact of that power and exploded. Immediately after, a milky white glow flowed out from the gems on the god's crown. It was divine and flawless, wrapping around his damaged body and reconstructing it rapidly. The God Emperor's face was pale. If not for the Sword of Misfortune that endured most of the martial emperor's power, even the god's crown might not have been able to protect him from that punch. Chapter 2068. 2068 Complete Suppression. 2068 Complete Suppression. On the other side, the Dragon Rider rode on the evil dragon and arrived with the Spear of Judgment. The Spear of Judgment shone with a bedazzling light. The spear was etched with countless mysterious runes and contained an ancient power of the god race, the power of judgment. The power of judgment could even kill the other party most of the time. Even if they could defend against the sharpness of the Spear of Judgment, they would be easily killed by the power of judgment. At the same time, the evil dragon flapped its gigantic meat wings and spat out pitch-black flames, biting towards Su Zimo's legs. Su Zimo's blood chi surged and a gigantic phantom appeared behind him. It resembled a dragon and phoenix with a dragon's head and phoenix's tail. A pair of gigantic wings grew on its back and it was scarlet like flames, as though boiling lava was flowing through its body. The phantom materialized rapidly and descended into the world. The many god race beings that were charging over suddenly felt a shuddering aura. An uncontrollable fear that came from the depths of their bloodlines surged into their hearts. Pest! Many god race beings raised their heads and gasped. Taboo! Dragon! Dragon Phoenix! The phantom conjured behind Su Zimo was a dragon phoenix. Even the evil dragon beneath the Dragon Rider was affected. It glared at the dragon phoenix phantom in midair with bewildered eyes. "What are you afraid of? It's fake." The dragon rider slapped the evil dragon beneath him and roared, "This is only his bloodline phenomenon." Suddenly, the dragon phoenix phantom in midair opened its eyes. Instantly, the dragon phoenix seemed to have come to life. Its gaze shifted and landed on the evil dragon beneath it. It opened his mouth and scarlet dragon saliva flowed. Roar! A deafening roar burst forth from the depths of the dragon phoenix's throat. The evil dragon shuddered in fear with that roar. Attack! The dragon rider roared once more and stabbed the evil dragon with the spear of judgment. In pain, the evil dragon could only charge toward Xueqi. Enraged, the dragon phoenix swooped down and grabbed the back of the evil dragon with its gigantic menacing dragon claws. The dragon head lowered and opened its mouth, biting the neck of the evil dragon. Crack! The head of the evil dragon was snapped by a single bite from the dragon phoenix. The evil dragon's body was torn into two by the dragon phoenix claw as well. Its smelly organs spilled down from midair and were burned by the dragon phoenix flames, turning into ashes before long. Actually, the dragon rider was not wrong. Indeed, this dragon phoenix was only a bloodline phenomenon conjured by Xueqi. After the martial Tao prime body fused the dragon phoenix true body's body, he fused his bloodline into his body and inherited the bloodline phenomenon. However, even if it was a phenomenon, it was a taboo that could not be challenged. The dragon phoenix phenomenon killed an emperor-level evil dragon on the spot. While the dragon phoenix was killing the evil dragon, the dragon rider had already arrived in midair. Descending from the skies, he held his spear with both hands and stabbed towards Xueqi's head. Without even looking, Xueqi raised his palm and grabbed the spear of judgment bare-handed. Piak! The spear of judgment was grabbed by Xueqi with one hand and did not budge at all. The power of judgment surrounding the spear of judgment was shattered by the 3 fate rings behind Xueqi instantly, and did not affect him at all. Xing! Suddenly, Xueqi exerted strength and grabbed the spear of judgment, yanking it. Ah! The dragon rider cried out in pain and could not hold on at all. The spear of judgment was snatched away by Xueqi with one hand and blood gushed out from his palms. At that moment, the God Emperor on the other side had just reconstructed his body with the help of the God's crown and stood up. Wielding the spear of judgment, Xueqi merely glanced at him indifferently and threw it in reverse. Swoosh! A golden light tore through the air in a flash. Xueqi did not know the secret skills of the god race, nor did he know how to control the spear of judgment. All he did was to focus all the power of his body and bloodline on the spear of judgment before releasing it. That was enough to destroy everything. Before the God Emperor could steady himself, he saw a golden light in his pupils. The God Emperor was shocked and could not dodge in time. He could only defend with a shield of Calamity in his hands. This was a true fight between a shield and a spear. The spear and shield were divine weapons of God's mainland. Boom! When the spear of judgment collided with the shield of Calamity, the world seemed to pause for a moment. A gigantic air current burst forth from the collision point of the 2 divine weapons and spread wildly in all directions, causing dust to fly everywhere. Cracks appeared on the surface of the 2 divine weapons. There was no victor in the fight between the spear and shield. In the blink of an eye, 3 of the 4 divine judgment weapons were crippled by Xueqi. Although the spear of judgment was shattered, the God Emperor could not defend against the berserk power contained in it and his body collapsed once more. Swoosh! This time round, the God Emperor did not linger on the battlefield. Before the God's crown could condense a body, his essence spirit hid within and fled into the distance. Of the 3 top experts of the God race, the Dragon Rider was the only one still standing in midair, unable to advance or retreat. He had not fought for a long time. The moment he was distracted, Xueqi's figure had already arrived before him. Without any unnecessary movements, 3 fate rings condensed behind him and he punched. It was already too late for the Dragon Rider to retreat. He roared and channeled his essence spirit. Suddenly, the golden armor on his body burned with raging flames. Those were golden flames. The Dragon Rider was enveloped by the flames as though he was born from the flames. I'll let you witness the sacred flame of the God race. The Dragon Rider roared. He had burned his divine blood and spirit to release that flame. That was the most ancient secret skill of the god race. By sacrificing his divine blood and soul, he would definitely die no matter the outcome. Playing with fire in front of me? With a mocking expression, Su Zimo suddenly opened his mouth and took a deep breath. Phew! The golden flames that were initially burning on the dragon rider's body turned into a stream of golden light that was devoured by Su Zimo. How dare you! The dragon rider's eyes widened. He could not imagine that someone would dare to devour the god race's sacred flame. This guy had an absolute death wish. However, he could not continue after saying 3 words. There was nothing unusual about Su Zimo. He swallowed the golden flames with a calm expression without any pain. Instead, he smacked his lips as though he was savoring the taste of the flames. The 3 fate rings behind Su Zimo seemed to have turned even more mysterious. Bang! Su Zimo punched the dragon rider on the cheek and shattered his head. The essence spirit of the dragon rider could not escape either. It was shattered by Su Zimo's punch and his headless corpse fell. The 3 top-tier experts of the god race charged forward and were suppressed by Su Zimo in less than 10 breaths. Among them, the dragon rider and the evil dragon beneath him even died on the battlefield. The remaining high priest was at the end of his road and stood on the city wall, swaying when he saw that. The god emperor was defeated and fled. Chapter 2069, 2069 Heaven and Earth Furnace. 2069 Heaven and Earth Furnace. The billions of god race beings were terrified when they saw that. However, at that moment, with so many god race beings gathered together and charging towards Su Zimo, the situation was already set. Even if anyone wanted to retreat, it was useless. The golden tide surged over and the ground shook as though it could drown everything. You want to challenge me? The gaze of the martial Dao prime body burned and his bloodline surged. As though a tsunami was surging through his body, his blood chi was channeled to its limits and he vanished in front of everyone. Where is he? Teleportation technique. The billions of god race beings charged forward and questions flashed through everyone's minds. Suddenly, the expressions of many god race beings changed as they looked up instinctively. In the world, the weather changed and the skies suddenly changed colors. As though they were shrouded by the setting sun, it was incomparably scarlet and soaked through the evening glow. Before long, the color of the other half of the skies gradually turned sky blue. What's wrong? What divine power and secret skill is that? Many god race beings looked around with bewildered expressions. Some of the god race beings even channeled their essence spirits and released divine powers that struck the strange firmaments. However, those divine powers disappeared into the void without causing any ripples. It's so hot. What's going on? Some of the god race beings had already begun to notice something unusual. The temperature of the world was rising rapidly. Suddenly, flames burst forth from the firmaments. Many god race beings looked up and their expressions changed. Massive fireballs began to descend from the skies and smash towards the crowd, covering the entire world. The fireballs engulfed the boundless central divine city. The billions of god race beings were way too dense. A single gigantic fireball could engulf a few god race beings with ease. This was a devastating catastrophe for the god race beings below. Boom! Boom! A fireball descended and smashed onto the city wall, creating a gigantic hole in the golden and indestructible city wall with flames splattering everywhere. Some of the god race beings could not dodge in time and were tainted by the flames. In the blink of an eye, they burned and turned into ashes before long. The god race army was in a mess. The ancient divine city fell into a sea of flames as well. Grandpa High Priest, should I beg the martial emperor for mercy? A little girl looked at everything before her and cried. The high priest was already at his wits' end and his expression was dark. However, there was no hint of retreat in his hazy eyes. He stomped heavily with the staff of dawn in his hands and shouted, "Everyone, don't panic. The god race is protected by the gods and has the advantage in numbers. As long as everyone joins forces, we'll be able to dispel this phenomenon of the martial emperor. Light riders, gather with me at the center. An emperor of the god race was also controlling the god race army with all his might. Under the orders of the high priest and some emperors of the god race, many god race beings gradually suppressed the fear in their hearts and calmed down, trying their best to gather closer. Suddenly, the color in the skies changed. Apart from the gigantic fireballs, a faint blue fire rain descended. The flames did not seem to have any temperature or earth-shaking aura. However, if it landed on a god race cultivator, he would die immediately, turning into ashes with his soul dissipated. The billion-strong god race army had just calmed down when they were baptized by the blue fire rain and collapsed once more in a mess. The high priest took a deep breath and used the last of his strength to shout, "Everyone, listen to my orders and release your divine powers with me. Use your bloodline phenomenons and attack the firmaments above our heads." The high priest's voice was hoarse and his shout sounded like the final cry of his life. That shout shocked the god race beings once more. "I'll give it my all. Even if I have to be burned by the flames, I have to pierce a hole in the firmaments." One after another, the god race beings no longer fled. They condensed their bloodline phenomenons and channeled their innate divine powers. Wielding dermic treasures, they accumulated strength and were prepared to join forces to penetrate the firmaments. Suddenly, a ball of flames burned from the body of an emperor of the god race and engulfed him before long without any warning. Many god race beings could clearly see that the scarlet flames did not come from the skies, but from the god race being's body. Ah! The god race being let out a tragic cry and his body contorted continuously. His divine blood surged but it could not extinguish the flames in his body. He released divine powers consecutively but the flames in his body intensified instead. In just a few breaths, the god race emperor was burned to ashes. A demonic red lotus flower appeared where he stood. "What's that?" The god race beings who saw that were scared out of their wits. "Your body is also." A god race being pointed at another god race being with a horrified expression. The same flames burst forth from the body of the clansman opposite him. In 3 breaths, the god race being was incinerated, leaving a red lotus imprint. At the same time, balls of flames ignited in the bodies of many god race beings. Karmic flames. Anyone tainted by negative karma would be burned by the karmic flames. Under the orders of the high priest, the billion-strong god race army finally overcame the fear in their hearts. Before they could combine their strength, they were defeated by the red lotus karmic fire. All the god race beings, including ancestor gods and emperors, fell into endless fear and could no longer fight. No one thought about how to resist as many god race beings fled everywhere, wanting to escape from the hellish sea of flames. Many god race beings discovered that no flames descended on the foothold of the living beings of Tianhuang Mainland. The many god race beings swarmed in that direction. Boom, boom, boom. However, the god race beings were blocked before they could reach everyone from Tianhuang Mainland. A faint red curved iron wall appeared between the living beings of Tianhuang Mainland and the god race, connected through the world. Some of the god race beings collided against the red iron wall and smoke billowed on the spot. Their flesh was burned and their flesh split open. Their bones were barbecued red and they died. At the same time, the god race beings that were fleeing in all directions encountered the same situation. Anyone that struck the fiery red iron walls would die as well. All the god race beings seemed to be trapped in a sealed vessel and could not advance or retreat with nowhere to run. The first flame was the dragon phoenix flame that the martial Tao prime body inherited from the dragon phoenix true body. The second flame was the tribulation fire that he comprehended later on. Every single tribulation fire contained the power of the heavenly tribulation and the god race of the lower worlds could not defend against it at all. The third flame was the red lotus karmic fire. The martial Tao prime body released his bloodline phenomenon and absorbed the god race and the central divine city. Using heaven and earth as a furnace, the 3 flames augmented and incinerated everything. The god race beings were trapped within and could not see everything clearly. Everyone from Tianhuang Mainland who was standing outside was shocked. In their eyes, a gigantic furnace vaguely appeared in the world. It was scarlet and burned with flames, standing upright. Chapter 2070. 2070 God's Ground. 2070 God's Ground. On the city wall, flames surged from the high priest's body as well. Grandpa High Priest! The little girl behind him exclaimed and wanted to charge forward. Although the little girl was also from the god race, she did not have much negative karma in her body. The martial Tao prime body released karmic flames, but not all god race beings had to endure it. God race beings with insufficient negative karma would not attract karmic flames. The high priest shook his head gently and released a spirit consciousness to repel the little girl, smiling bitterly. To think that this calamity of the god race would still come. Even without the karmic flames, he would not have been able to survive. The high priest turned back to look at the dilapidated ancient city that had fallen into the sea of flames. He then looked at his clansmen who were fleeing in all directions outside the divine city, and his gaze gradually dimmed. Nianqing, go on. The high priest murmured softly, I hope you can save the remaining clansmen. The moment he said that, the old body of the high priest was engulfed by the karmic flames and turned into dust in the blink of an eye, leaving a red lotus flower imprinted on the city wall. Senior Martial Emperor, Senior Martial Emperor. The little girl named Nianqing wiped away her tears wildly and carefully took out a page of golden paper from her robes, shouting at the firmaments. The figure of the martial Tao prime body appeared faintly in midair. He looked down at the world and was slightly stunned when his gaze landed on the little girl on the city wall. The girl had golden hair that was slightly curled, resembling the Nianqi he first met back then. The martial Tao prime body closed his eyes for a moment before opening them. With a thought of his spirit consciousness, he dispersed the furnace of the world and the apocalyptic flames dissipated as well. In just dozens of breaths, hundreds of millions of god race beings died. Furthermore, many of them were experts at the level of emperors, ancestor gods and mighty figures. The martial Tao prime body had no intention of wiping them out entirely. Not everyone in the god race loved to fight and wanted to conquer everywhere, dominating over other living beings. Of course, the martial Tao prime body was decisive to kill. In this battle, almost all the emperors of the god race and the ancestor gods were killed. After today, the god race would probably require an unimaginable period of time before they could recover to their peak. In fact, there was a high chance that they would not be able to recover from this setback. Of course, the most important goal of the martial Tao prime body's killing move was to make the god race feel fear. He wanted that fear to be deeply rooted in the bloodline and soul of the god race. He wanted God's mainland to be so fearful that they would never dare to step foot into Tianhuang mainland ever again. At that moment, the heaven and earth furnace vanished and the flames dissipated. The god race beings who survived the calamity stood on the spot with lost expressions. The martial Tao prime body stood in midair and walked slowly towards the central divine city, passing above their heads. However, none of the god race beings dared to raise their heads. If any living being dared to walk above the god race before today, it would be an unacceptable provocation and they would definitely suffer the punishment of the god race. However, at that moment, no god race being dared to look at the figure in midair. They were afraid that their gazes would incur the wrath of that person and bring about a calamity of death or even annihilation of their entire race. All the god race beings realized that this person's methods could destroy the entire god race and turn God's mainland into a lifeless flaming hell. At that moment, every single god race being lowered their haughty heads against that figure. Before long, the martial Tao prime body arrived on the city wall. He looked at the little girl beside him and was about to speak when his gaze landed on the golden paper. In the void outside the city wall far away, a crack suddenly appeared and a figure appeared. Wearing the god's crown, it was the god emperor who had escaped earlier on. Martial Emperor. The god emperor looked at the dilapidated and devastated divine city with a menacing expression and hatred. Gritting his teeth, he said, "You'll ascend one day. I'll wait patiently. The day you ascend will be the day your entire Tianhuang mainland will be annihilated." The martial Tao prime body swept his gaze and looked at the god emperor. When she heard that, the little girl's expression changed starkly. Initially, the martial emperor had already stopped. The little girl did not wish to bring about the extinction of the god race because of the god emperor. Senior Martial Emperor. The little girl shouted hurriedly. However, she realized that the martial Tao prime body had already vanished from her line of sight. In the blink of an eye, The martial Tao Prime body had already arrived before the God Emperor and reached out to grab the latter. The God Emperor's expression changed starkly. Without hesitation, he retreated into the void crack. The martial Tao Prime body sneered and chased after him without hesitation. After charging into the void crack, the martial Tao Prime body felt his eyes light up, as though he had entered another world. This world was filled with light everywhere and was very different from God's Mainland and Tianhuang Mainland. In God's Mainland and Tianhuang Mainland, the martial Tao Prime body could sense the threat of the heaven and earth laws the entire time. As long as the power he released exceeded the upper limit of the lower worlds, it would definitely cause a backlash from the heaven and earth laws of the lower worlds. However, that threat did not exist in this world. There was even some heaven and earth essence chi in this space, although it was extremely thin. The upper world. The martial Tao Prime body's heart skipped a beat. However, he quickly denied that thought. This could not be the upper world. However, it was probably a small dimension created by a top-tier expert of the upper world. Independent of the billion minor kiliocosms, this place was not bound by the heaven and earth laws of the lower worlds. Actually, there was such a place in Tianhuang Mainland as well. Back when Dai Yu imparted Su Zimo's cultivation technique to him in Pingyang Town, she opened up a Tao ground in his room. The Tao ground was extremely similar to the world before him. However, there was no heaven and earth essence chi in that Tao ground. The martial Tao Prime body would not suffer the backlash of the heaven and earth laws when he cultivated in the Tao ground in Pingyang Town. Therefore, his cultivation could continue to advance. Ha 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 ha. The God Emperor reared his head in laughter and glared at the martial Tao Prime body, saying hatefully, "Martial Emperor, you've been tricked. The reason why I said that earlier on was to lure you over." Oh! The martial Tao Prime body had an indifferent expression and asked, "What is this place?" "This is the most secretive and ancient mystic realm of God's Mainland, God's ground." The God Emperor could not help but laugh. He looked at the martial Tao Prime body as though he was looking at a dead man and said slowly, "In this world, there are true gods of the God race. The cultivation realms of the God race beings in God's ground have far surpassed emperors and are at the level of black gods." The martial Tao Prime body had a calm expression and there were still no emotions in his eyes. Ha 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 ha. When the God Emperor saw that, he burst into laughter. "Martial Emperor, you must be scared out of your wits." The martial Tao Prime body was still silent. The God Emperor was enlightened and sneered, "I got it. Given your knowledge, you don't even know what a black god is at all. Do you want me to explain it to you so that you can die in peace?" You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.